Chapter 505. Boy! The black dragon's huge claws slammed down, but the lich had already cast a spell in time. He entered a state of nothingness where he could neither cause nor receive damage. The ferocious claws passed through his body without causing any damage. What a ridiculous trick, Aglarin. Are you going to keep running like this? The black dragon's voice rumbled. You're right. The huge skeleton phantom nodded and narrowed its eyes. The scepter hidden in its body shone brightly. Dragon drown. Aglarin's voice went straight into Caesar's ears and blocked his five senses. His breath became unstable, and he fell into a temporary state of weakness. He had to retract his wings and land. How is it? The lich asked. These are the feelings of the dragons who were bound by the scepter before they died. Now, they're all added to you. The feeling was indeed unpleasant. Caesar's was violently impacted, and huge waves surged in his spirit sea. However, it only lasted for 2 seconds before calming down. Caesar's spirit and will were far stronger than the average legendary ancient dragon. He had enough resistance to this kind of spiritual attack. The black dragon shook its head. After all, it was a weapon against dragons. No matter how much Caesar had evolved, the scepter would still have an effect on him, although the effect was not as fatal as when it was used on ordinary dragons. Caesar grinned and showed his sharp fangs. I heard the cries of those dragons. Cries of begging for mercy? The lich's voice had a hint of laughter. No, Caesar said. They're crying at me and begging me to destroy this weapon and crush you. How pitiful, Aglarin said in a sad tone. He was soon speechless because Caesar's attack was close. As the top creature in Iradia's material plane, the lich had never thought that there would be something that could restrain his ability so much. However, Caesar was different. This huge dragon's magic resistance was almost maxed out, and with the new undead iron armor, Aglarin felt like he was facing an iron wall. He could not use his godlike magic skills at all. The lich was naturally at a disadvantage. He was suppressed by the black dragon to the point that he could not raise his head, could not keep up, could not fight, and could not block. These were the 3 problems that Aglarin was facing, and also the embodiment of the strength of the Black Dragon Emperor. At this moment, Odin crossed the distance at an extremely fast speed and sneaked into the mountain furnace that the dwarf had hollowed out. She drilled a small hole in the top and hid herself to peek. Extraordinary creatures were very sensitive to sight. If she was not careful, she would be discovered. She had to be careful. In the eyes of the little girl, the 2 creatures that stood at the top of the material plane fought fiercely. Her father's advantage was getting bigger and bigger. The lich was already beaten to the point that he could not fight back. However, Odin keenly saw that under the appearance of tiredness, a light flashed behind the lich's back. A second arm made of magic power was revealed. The bright blue substance of magic power was shining with a dangerous light. The pair of arms was very small. They were only half the size of Odin's body. Compared to the huge monsters in the field, they were as small as a speck of dust. However, peeking from the back, the fingers of the pair of hands danced in a very dignified rhythm. A powerful force was being formed. Caesar did not seem to feel anything. His face was expressionless. His claws pierced through the lich's body. The magic power melted under his claws and disappeared. To be honest, I don't hate undead creatures, but I hate you. I hate your family name. To be more precise, I hate the current emperor of the unfallen empire who went against me. Then he shook his head. In that case, I don't hate you. I pity you, Aglarin. You were killed by your own son. Ha ha. Of course I'm pitiful. I became a lonely ghost without anyone to rely on. Sigh. Oh. Black Dragon thought for a moment and said, I suddenly changed my mind. Aglarin, I don't plan to kill you. Instead, I plan to give you a choice. Kneel before me, the king of the Black Wings in the north, and serve my empire. You should understand that your weak magic is no threat to me at all. Huh. The unique dry laughter of the undead creature echoed. You want me to kneel before you, Black Dragon? First, you can't give me anything. Second, although I've already embraced death, I won't help the enemy of the unfallen empire. Third, you're talking a lot more than last time. I know you're stalling for time to find out my trump card and deal a fatal blow. Actually, I'm also stalling for time to prepare my trump card. Father. Before the Lich could finish his sentence, Odin's scream had already sounded. Aglarin, who seemed to have woken up, raised his fingers made of magic power. His eyes were full of shrewdness. The energy that had been brewing for a long time gushed out, and the whole mountain creaked. Suddenly, countless small meteorites burning with black fire appeared on the top of the furnace. After several rounds of testing, Aglarin knew that most spells would not work on the Black Dragon. However, evocation magic was an exception because the substances created by magic were real and could cause damage to the Black Dragon. Double gravity, solidify, wild growth. These spells were not used on the Black Dragon. Instead, they were cast on the meteorites created with black fire. In just a moment, they were dozens of times larger. Under the terrifying acceleration, they roared and bombarded. Immediately, there were continuous explosions. Broken stones flew everywhere, and black fire splashed everywhere. The energy center of the furnace trembled violently and then collapsed. The whole mountain was collapsing. A huge black shadow stood up from the thick smoke and rolling stones. A low voice filled the sky. Is this it? Aglarin, this is your last resort? Of course not. On the other side, the Lich had already begun to speed up. Undercurrent, dense negative energy poured out, spreading into an overwhelming tide of darkness. Everywhere it passed, it was bound and trapped. However, its target was not Caesar, but Odin, who was tumbling and trying to avoid the collapse of the mountain. The so-called undercurrent was an invisible undercurrent. The flowing shadow of negative energy was like a slippery viper, flowing with the air. Little Odin did not have the ability to avoid the spells carefully prepared by the demigod. The next moment, she was bound by countless hands of darkness and pulled to Aglarin's side. Look, what a cute little guy. The Lich's huge skull appeared beside Odin. His eye sockets with soul fire floating in them stared at her. Child, your father is so incompetent. He didn't tell you not to get close to any supernatural creature. Because as long as a little guy like you appears beside us, no matter what you do, we'll know. Opportunity is a swift warrior. When the time comes, I will not hesitate. I will always seize it, so I always win. As he spoke, he turned his head to the Black Dragon. The tables have turned. Caesar Tangerine, what are you going to do now? Not far away, Caesar flapped his wings and hovered in the air. So you've already discovered it. So, the meteorite earlier was to attract my attention, and the purpose was to seize the opportunity to capture my daughter. You came up with such a plan in such a short time. Not bad. Don't think about rushing over, Aglarin said coldly. Aglarin said coldly. I know. You haven't used your spotless land yet. It doesn't matter. I can swallow this little guy before your word of truth takes effect. You said that opportunity is a swift warrior. Caesar nodded and said softly, Odin. Oh, little Odin, whose body was bound by the touch of darkness, took a breath harmlessly. She puffed out her mouth and blew at the huge Lich's skull. A small piece of dark sand-like substance gushed out of the baby dragon's mouth and spread to the fan-shaped area in front of her. Wherever it passed, all the magic disappeared. Even Aglarin's body was melted and disappeared. What is this? Just as Aglarin's confusion appeared in his mind, the light that drowned everything was already in front of him. This was the breath of the Black Dragon Emperor. Its power was 100 times stronger than that of the baby dragon. The terrifying energy swept over in an instant, annihilating everything tangible. Even space was shattering layer by layer. Caesar took the opportunity to come to the baby dragon's side. He protected Odin in his claws and coldly watched Aglarin's body disappear. The Lich couldn't even make a sound. In the blink of an eye, it became one with the dust and was swallowed by the chaos. Is it dead? After a long time, Odin poked its little head out of Caesar's claws and looked around at the empty mountain ruins. No, extraordinary creatures aren't that easy to kill. This guy's a Lich. His phylactery isn't here. Caesar picked up the baby dragon. Were you scared when you were caught? No. Odin raised its head and said, Why not? Why should I be scared? Odin asked in confusion. Caesar smiled and put the little guy on his head. He began to walk back. His huge body gradually disappeared. Let's go back first. Your mother will be worried if she finds out that you're missing. Also, tell me, what did you learn when you secretly came to watch the battle? Many years later, Aglar and Lamorhin, who never showed up in the outside world and always hid underground, wrote in his memoirs, I never thought that it would be my first and only chance to threaten the Black Emperor. At that time, Odin Tangerine, the master of Twilight Light, was only a few months old, but she showed incredible ability. After that, she grew at an unimaginable speed until no one could compare to her. Chapter 506. Bizon, have you really met the high officials of the Northern Empire? In the central city of Vagars, in an open space on the outskirts of the city, a group of local farmers surrounded the bard and asked. Bizon held a harp in his hand and casually plucked the strings. After a string of notes, he nodded and said seriously, Of course. What he said was half true and half false. This guy was originally a wandering singer. Unfortunately, he had nothing and was not famous. Every day, his clothes were ragged and he did not have enough food to fill his stomach. Whenever he was hungry, Bizon would choose to sleep to resist the hunger in his stomach. Later, one day, Bizon did not know whether it was because he was so hungry or because he had slept for too long. In a trance, he saw a man in a black robe with a black claw pattern embroidered on his cuffs. The man handed him an apple, and Bizon swallowed it without hesitation. Later, Bizon found that he gradually mastered a shallow trick called confusion. In order to do a good job of intelligence, to inquire about various news, and to integrate into various groups, the Blackwing Empire's intelligence department was trying to expand their external staff as much as possible. Caesar's strategy was to sneak into various countries through the shape-shifting monsters, and then use it as a base to develop the underlings. Bizon was one of the numerous underlings in the trading city who had been seduced by the shape-shifting monsters. He appeared in the city of Vagars, not because he was staying there, but because he had deliberately come here. In addition to investigating the intelligence situation in the city of Vagars, Bizon also shouldered the important task of establishing an intelligence station and doing a good job of public opinion. He had to promote the ruthlessness and toughness of the empire, and also satirize the selfishness and weakness of the head of the trading city to prepare for the Blackwing Empire to win over some city-states in the future. I heard that the Northern Empire is not as fierce and unruly as the rumors say. Instead, they are very friendly? A townsman asked. Whether they are friendly or not, I am not particularly sure. Bizon did not know how many times he had said similar words in front of countless people. But I can guarantee that after traveling to so many countries, the territories with the Blackwing flag are the most peaceful and orderly places I have ever seen. The laws of that country are strict, just, and without bias. If this happened in the north today, I don't know how they would deal with it. A farmer sighed. Another farmer said hatefully, In any case, they would not let it go like this. These nobles not only want to tax us, they also want to rob us of our food. What's the difference between these lords and bandits? The situation in the trading city was getting more and more complicated. On one hand, the leader to Shamu and the Empire had signed the Iradia trade regulations and the military assistance regulations to cut off all contact with the North and drop the Iradia Iron Curtain across the Iradia. On the other hand, thanks to the unremitting efforts of the Blackwing Empire and the local tyrant, the Clyde Merchant Group, the Central Region and the North had successfully established the seventh secret trade route. There were 4 city-states that had relied on the secret trade with the North to obtain huge profits. They were Nisto, Ulse, Prin, and Serene. Given the scale of the trade, it was impossible for the local city lords to be unaware of it. This could only mean that nearly half of the city-states had already disobeyed Tarshimus's agreement. The rulers of Nissus and Orsay, Duke Bruberin and Duke Kainsiri, had even secretly gone north to sign a secret agreement with the Northern Emperor. Bizon had been active the moment he arrived in Vagars. The situation of this city was relatively special. Because it was adjacent to Nistu, the people of Vagars had seen Nistu's economic situation deteriorate day by day because of the trade with the north. The economic development was rapid, and the living standards were rising. In order to find a chance to make a fortune, many people had begun to migrate to Nistu. The local people's voices for overturning the trade ban became louder and louder. The intelligence department of the Blackwing Empire had investigated and found Vagars to be a worthy target. So, they sent a large number of Bizans into Vagars to guide public opinion and control as many people as possible to pave the way for what might happen next. Bizan put down the harp in his hand and pretended to casually mention, "I heard that Mernin is going to open up a trade route to the north." The townspeople were stunned. Someone asked curiously, "Mernin is right next to Pudathius. Under the eyes of Tishamu, how dare they defy the ban of the ruler of the entire territory?" It sounds a little unbelievable, right? Bezin said with interest, but smart people would have expected that the ruler of mine, Infa Shirway, and the ruler of Ors, Kane Shirway, are brothers from the same father and mother. Since Ors has already sided with the north, it's only natural that mine would follow suit. It's an open secret. Tishamu's words are no longer useful. Since the unfallen empire can't give us anything, why should we listen to them? After listening to Bizan, one of the townspeople suddenly thought, since everyone is doing this, why can't we follow suit? There's no need to think about it. His companion next to him seemed to have seen through everything. Our lord is Duke Feaunon. He is the adopted son of the previous ruler and a staunch supporter of the guardian of the territory. Duke Feaunon strictly forbids us from having any dealings with the north. I heard from friend that this lord even sent troops to build passes, block trade routes, and interfere with the affairs of the inner-sea city. Even Nice doesn't allow Vagars to enter the city. After he finished speaking, the atmosphere became a little gloomy. Most of the townspeople stopped talking. The man looked at the people around him and said, "But I heard that Marquis Joel has been running around trying to persuade Duke Feaunon." This lord's words carry a lot of weight. Speaking of which, Marquis Joel should be the original. Stop talking. Just as he was about to finish his sentence, a frightened townsman interrupted him. He turned around and saw a look of unease. "May the gods bless us. If the guards and soldiers hear what you just said, we're all done for." These words were like a basin of cold water, drenching the people who were talking about the world back to reality. They realized that they were just some small characters at the bottom of the city-state, such as farmers, craftsmen, and servants. A single word from those big shots could take their lives. The whole scene suddenly became cold, and no one spoke anymore. Sigh. After a long while, Bizan sighed and picked up his harp. "I should go to the tavern. If I don't get the reward tonight, I won't have anything to eat today." As he spoke, he gave the person opposite him a subtle look, indicating that they should stop here for the day and prepare to leave separately. However, at this moment, a figure rushed out of the town and shouted while panting, "Something big has happened." "Slow down, what's new?" someone asked as he approached. "Duke Feaunon was assassinated in the theater this afternoon." Chapter 507. My lord, Duke Feaunon was assassinated in the theater this afternoon. "I know." Joseph Lunn sat on the chair and responded in a neutral tone. He reached out his hand and rubbed his temples. He paused for a moment before he raised his head and looked at the young scholar, who was full of joy. "You seem to be very happy?" "Lord Marquis." The young scholar's expression froze. His lips moved, but he did not know how to answer. Logically speaking, his master should be very happy that Duke Feaunon was assassinated. Marquis Joseph could take this opportunity to take back all the power that originally belonged to him. The Lunn family, behind Joseph Lunn, was one of the oldest and most prominent families in the central region. Their history could be traced back to Bear King Lothar Lunn, a figure during the Second Era's northward migration. He had once defeated the ancient Orc coalition in the valley, and then built the city of Vagars with other human leaders. In the thousands of years that followed, the Lunn family had been the lords of the city of Vagars and the surrounding areas. It was not until 25 years ago that the previous king of Vagars was killed and devoured by the ancient Red Dragon Queen Aksui in a battle against the dragons. After this incident, Tishamu immediately sent his direct descendant, Duke Fei-Aonan, to Vagars to temporarily take over the position of governor. A young child cannot govern a city. This was the original words of Tishamu. This sentence was not inappropriate at the time, but it was not until a long time later that people understood the deeper meaning. On the surface, Joseph Lund could still inherit his father's title of duke, the land, the army, and all the taxes. But in reality, other than the title of duke, everything in the city of Vagars was managed by Fei-Aonan, who was the governor. After a period of time, under the double suppression of Tishamu and Duke Fei-Aonan, the power of the Lund family was gradually eroded, and their influence was decreasing day by day. Even so, the ruler of the holy city of Pudasius was unwilling to let the matter rest. 15 years ago, after Fei-Aonan had taken complete control of the situation in Virgil, Tishamu had casually found an excuse to remove Joseph's dukedom and demote him to a marquis. This matter had shocked the entire trading city at the time. Since then, the illustrious Lund family had been completely defeated and unable to recover from this setback. Because of this, one could well imagine Joseph Lund's hatred for Duke Fei-Aonan and head of state Tashin. But what puzzled the scholar was that Marquis Joseph didn't show the slightest bit of joy at Fei-Aonan's death. Instead, he seemed to be somewhat troubled. Joseph pondered for a moment, rubbed his face, and raised his head to ask, "Where's the murderer? Did you catch him?" "He's been captured by the guards." The young scholar could not read his mind, so he did not dare to say anything more. But that guy refused to tell us who he was and who ordered him to do this. "He committed suicide an hour ago." This was a planned murder, and no one had seen him before? The scholar shook his head. "I've asked the patrols, but they all said that they had never seen him before. It's a new face. The identity of this person is still under investigation. Take me to see the killer." Joseph stood up. The scholar led him, along with a group of attendants and guards, to a heavily guarded camp in the governor's mansion. After the killer was captured, he had committed suicide halfway before he could be brought to the dungeon. The soldiers in charge of the capture knew that they could not escape punishment. They were terrified and did not know what to do with the body, so they could only temporarily leave the body here. The dead man was locked in a dark room with shackles on his hands and feet. His hair was disheveled, but his face was calm. The priest said that he had been cursed beforehand, as if he had already been prepared to die. "Leave me alone for a while, all of you," Joseph said. "Sir, this." The captain was a little hesitant. "What? Are you worried that the undead will revive and I'll be killed by a dead man?" Joseph glared at him. No one dared to say anything more. They retreated one by one and closed the door. In the large and dark prison room, there was only the lonely and cold candlelight and the faint aura of negative energy. Marquis Joseph raised his head slightly and closed his eyes. The next moment, the faint negative energy that overflowed from the body soared like wildfire in the wind. In the blink of an eye, it filled the entire room. It cheered and circled around Joseph, then rushed to the body and swam around it. After a while, Joseph opened his eyes again. The negative energy disappeared without a trace. He allowed a long breath and sneered. Duke Virgil, Element Master Fei-Aonan, was assassinated by an ordinary person. After his death, he couldn't even enter the kingdom of God. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I'm afraid I wouldn't have believed it. After that, he fell silent. He clenched his fists and stared at the body. This continued for a few minutes until a few drops of blood dripped from his hands. The veins on his hands were exposed. He had pierced his palms with his nails. "Damn it!" Joseph suddenly cursed fiercely. His voice was colder than the winter wind. 15 years, a whole 15 years. You don't know how many things I've done. Vassals, territory, army, and popular support. I could have easily taken back Virgil. I was already the master of Virgil. But, Fei-Aonan, you actually killed him. All my previous efforts have been wasted. All my previous efforts have been wasted. Who cares about Fei-Aonan? If I want to kill him, I can kill him at any time. But if I kill one Fei-Aonan, there will be a second Fei-Aonan and a third Fei-Aonan. I spent 15 years to make Tishamu lower his guard. How can you do this? How can you do this? Marquis Joseph's hands were trembling. He squeezed the words out from between his teeth. Blackwing Empire. Using his necromancy ability, Joseph knew that this assassination was the work of the Blackwing Empire. The assassin had taken some kind of special drug before the operation. Using this drug, he passed through many tests and came to Faye Onan's side to kill him. Such a thing could only be found in the north. However, to Shanmu, the ruler of the trading city-state, would not believe these words. With Faye Onan dead, he had become the direct beneficiary and the biggest suspect. He would definitely be investigated. Joseph Lun was very clear that there was no secret in the world that could never be revealed. Regardless of whether he had killed Faye Onan or not, as long as Shamu began to investigate in this direction, his actions over the past 15 years would definitely reveal some clues. What made Marquis Joseph puzzled was whether the Blackwing Empire's assassination plan was targeted at Faye Onan, who had always opposed them, or whether they knew about his internal affairs and were deliberately forcing him to do so. The former would make Joseph sigh at the influence of the Northern Empire. The latter would make Joseph feel a deep fear. Of course, no matter what, he had been forced into a dead end. There's no other way. Joseph sighed. His face slowly returned from the inhuman coldness and darkness to his normal calmness. He waved his hand, and the wound and blood on his palm gradually disappeared. Then, he removed the soundproof magic in the room and slowly left the confinement room. Returning to his own mansion, Joseph Lund dismissed his attendants and stepped into the secret passage in the mansion. He walked through the long and dark corridor and said to the dark viper in the corner, "With Faye Onan dead, we have no way out. There's no need to hide in the future." His expression turned cold. Inform the vassals to mobilize the army and launch a surprise attack on Coer tomorrow night. Without that old bastard John Arthur, I'll see the bear flag of the Lund family on Coer City the day after tomorrow. This was not difficult. The king of Coer, the legendary sword St. John Arthur, had died in the attack on the north. The elite troops of Coer City had been wiped out. Now, the large city-state was under the control of a woman and did not have much resistance left. The difference between them and Vagers was huge. However, the Viper in the shadows did not understand the deeper meaning of this. Attacking Coer does not give us any substantial benefits. There are no benefits, but we still have to do it. Cut off the path of retreat and show our determination. Marquis Joseph said, "Haven't they always wanted to interfere with the trading city-states? We should also force them and put everything on the table. I don't believe that they will leave Vagers alone." Understood. The Viper nodded and disappeared into the darkness. The war is about to begin. Joseph Lund stared at the thick black fog that could not be dispersed. Flames rose in his eyes. I didn't expect that I would be the one to kick off the curtains. If I could successfully control the 10 city-states in another 30 years, I might have a chance to fight for hegemony. But now... Chapter 508. No one would have thought that after the assassination of Duke Faye Onan, the city of Vagers would suddenly launch an attack on the neighboring city of Coer. Unprepared, Coer was caught off guard. Coupled with the great disparity in power between the two sides, the outcome of the war was very clear from the beginning. As Marquis Joel expected, in just one day, the bear flag of the Lone family was raised on the city wall of Coer. Soon, the news spread to the northern court. He actually dares to declare war on other cities. After listening to all the reports, Hogg was the first to speak. Vagers and Coer are both members of the Trade Federation. If the two sides start a war, Shamu will definitely not ignore it. Is his name Joel Lone? Caesar nodded in appreciation. He's very smart. Marquis Joel, the current patriarch of the Lone family, the true ruler of the city of Vagers. The powerful intelligence system of the Northlands had successfully collected a lot of unknown information about this guy. It could be said that they knew him like the back of their hand. Hearing the Black Dragon Emperor's praise, Hogg thought for a moment and quickly understood. After Faye Onan's death, he realized that he had no way out, so he decided to find another backer. Using Coer as a sign of allegiance, he expressed his attitude to Coer's mortal enemy, us. This is a gamble of life and death. Although the military power of Vagars is ranked among the top among the trading cities, once Tashama mobilizes for war, Vagars will fall without any reinforcements. The Jackalan chief concluded and then asked the Northern Emperor, should we speak up for them? In the eyes of Joe alone, this was a dead end, but in the eyes of the Northlands, it was a problem that could be solved with a notice or a letter. Under the current situation of maintaining peace on the surface, the trading cities had to maintain maximum restraint. As long as the Blackwing Empire, one of the two hegemonic powers, was willing to speak up for Vagars, it would be difficult for Tishanmu to resist the pressure to impose sanctions on Vagars. No. Unexpectedly, Caesar shook his head. You mean to give up on Vagars? Hogg asked. That's not what I meant. Black Dragon continued to shake his head. Joseph Lunn. He is the same type of person as Roy Brando, a lone wolf full of ambition, waiting for an opportunity to strike. He is very smart and a good chess piece, but unfortunately, he has yet to realize that he is a chess piece. Since that's the case, let him feel it. Let him know how much weight Virgil has on Iradia's chessboard. Hogg understood what Caesar meant. The Blackwing Empire did not say a word about the affairs of the trading city-states for the time being. They were waiting for Tishamur to launch a war to punish Vigia. They were waiting for Joseph Ron to find it difficult to continue before intervening. What happens after that? Hogg wanted to know Caesar's next decision so that he could prepare for the next action in advance. Putting aside the indecisive and disgusting Prin and Maine, Nistu and Ols have already signed an alliance agreement with us. Together with Vagars and Coer, it can be said that more than half of the trading city-states are living under the Blackwing Empire, Caesar said. The next step is, of course, to completely incorporate the trading city-states into our pockets. The legendary Noel nodded, pondered for a moment, and said, but the empire on which the sun never sets should not ignore this. Of course not. Caesar let out two sneers. I guess after the North assists Vagars, they will soon make a move. I have to say that human disrupted my plan and brought the war forward, but this is a good opportunity. The sky was dyed golden. Garcia Whisperwind put her hands on the ornately carved railing outside the window and stared at the gradually dispersing light. The dawn was right in front of her, creeping through the forest and fields, turning the earth from dark to indigo and then to green under her feet. Long snake-like water snaked out from the ridge of the mountain, and the waterfall outside the castle surged with white mist. Garcia could vaguely feel the water splashing on her face. What else is there? She asked. Tishamur of the trading city-state is gathering troops. Behind her, her maid replied. Tishamur once sent a messenger to Vagars and asked the rebel leader, Joseph Rune, to go to Pudasius to be punished. But Joseph Rune did not respond and sent someone to cut off the messenger's ears. So Tishamur declared war and wanted to use the blood of Rune's white bear to water the land. Garcia looked away and stopped watching the sunrise. No matter how beautiful the morning sun was, it could not lift her mood. She did not know how to feel when she heard that the queen of the Blackwing Empire had already given birth to a son for the emperor. What about the Blackwing Empire? She asked absent-mindedly. Is Vagars' judgment supported by it? I'm not sure. According to our observations, the Blackwing Empire has not made any unusual moves. The long-eared female elf realized that the queen did not seem to be too concerned about political affairs recently, but she did not say much. But the Wolfheart Kingdom of the Fox and Wolf Kingdom is mobilizing troops. Also, some countries in the Ersala region seem to have military operations. The Wolfheart Kingdom, Ersala, these countries are acting according to the will of that guy. Without his orders, they will not act on their own. There must be something we don't know. Garcia tucked her silver hair behind her ear and said uneasily, Iradia is going to war, a large-scale, bloody war. The door of the room was knocked, and the maid heard it and asked. She left for a while and then returned. Your Highness, there is one more thing. The maid said, We just received news that Queen Luna of the Blackwing Empire went home yesterday to visit her relatives and has now entered the territory of the Elven Duchy. Now, Garcia turned her head. You should know this news in advance. Garcia called the maid in the palace and changed her clothes while thinking about how to face Luna. She thought that if she could talk to Luna and persuade Caesar before the war began, she might be able to change the Black Dragon Emperor's mind. But as she thought about it, Garcia's thoughts would always stray. Luna's identity as the queen, the daughter of Odin Tangerine, she had not seen that guy for a long, long time. The location of the meeting with the Blackwing Queen was a small garden. The garden was in the shape of a circle with a white tower surrounding it. Blue flowers were planted on the soil and grass. Initially, the blacksmith had wanted to plant Yanin flowers, but Jaisha had rejected it. She did not want her garden to be filled with Yanin flowers like the one in front of the Blackwing Palace. That was prepared for Luna. Luna saw Garcia from afar and immediately got up, flapping her little wings and flying over. She hugged her passionately and even left a light kiss on her cheek. "Oh, Your Highness Garcia, I haven't been home for a long time. I didn't expect this place to have changed so much. I almost got lost in the oak forest." "How could that be?" Garcia replied with a gentle smile, feeling warm in her heart. Thank goodness Luna was still that cute, lively, and shy girl. She did not have the arrogant and noble appearance of the Empire's queen. "Little Odin, come over and say hello to Your Highness Garcia." The next moment, Luna turned around and waved behind her. A strange-looking baby dragon poked its head out from the cover of flowers and plants. It flapped its butterfly-like wings and tilted its head to look at the queen of the Elven Dukedom. At this moment, Garcia's heart seemed to be gripped by a hand. She could not move at all. Almost at the same time that Odin Tangerine was born, the news spread like snowflakes to all parts of Iradia. The Elven Dukedom naturally knew about this big event in the north. Luna's parents had even invited her to visit the Blackwing Empire, but Garcia rejected them. She subconsciously avoided this matter and did not watch any information or videos about the fairy dragon. Speaking of which, this was the first time Garcia met Caesar and Luna's daughter. Her beautiful and fair face was slightly flushed. After a while, Odin flapped his wings and flew over. He transformed into his little fairy form midway and hugged Garcia. "Oh, little mommy, you're so beautiful." Chapter 509. A middle-aged man in leather armor was walking on the city wall with a sharp sword in his hand. The weather was still cold, but his forehead was sweating. Joseph Lunn looked around with a gloomy face. After the Battle of Coer, he had been assassinated, but it was not a big deal. In the hands of a person with a special status, there would naturally be many special resources. Joseph had been preparing for his secret plan for a long time, of course, including the military. In the many years before, he had not only regained control of Virgil's guard army, but also prepared a few secret troops. Therefore, Virgil's actual military strength was quite strong. Otherwise, they would not have been able to take down Coer in one night. In addition to the 50,000-strong regular guards that met the federal regulations, Joseph Lunn also had his own guards, an intelligence system, an assassin organization, and a rapid reaction force, which included a legendary monk, dozens of great mages, and elite warriors. It was late at night. Looking down from the towering city wall, Coer City was like a giant lying on its back, sleeping in the darkness. There were some faint lights in the distant streets. A man in armor looked down from the city wall, his dark gray cloak fluttering in the wind. "I heard that when John Arthur was alive, he liked to look at his city from here," Joseph said casually. "But it is now yours," the scholar behind him said respectfully. "What news have you got?" Joseph Lunn's face was expressionless. It seemed that he was not happy to have this city. Raven brought it from Myren. Tishamu has left Razor River. Along the way, there are lords joining them. They have reorganized their army at the causeway and are moving towards Coer. The Marquis turned around, his eyes cold. His pupils were deep black, like slowly rotating black holes. Tishamu's reaction is within my expectations. I sent a message to Ulse, asking them to set up an ambush at the Kant's Canyon, the only way for the Alliance army to pass through. How did they respond? Well, they have not given a response yet. No response. That means it's a rejection. Joseph laughed coldly. I don't think there's any news from the north yet. right? Are you saying that the Blackwing Empire intends to abandon us? Not to that extent. The Marquis in armor shook his head. He raised his neck and looked into the deep darkness outside the city. Piper, do I know what I saw? I saw that the Trade Federation had turned into a gladiator arena. Here, the Northern Empire and its opponents released their fighting beasts from their cages and let them bite and kill each other. I don't think Emperor Tangerine would let himself lose a round out of thin air. Are you comparing us to fighting beasts? Scholar Piper tightened his collar. Sir, I don't understand. The Marquis lowered his head and stared at his hand without speaking, as if he was observing his own palm lines. After a long while, he said in a low voice, "The so-called gladiatorial battle is nothing more than two wild beasts fighting with their lives on the line. This is not rare in Iradia's uninhabited land. Why are there so many people shouting themselves hoarse in the arena? Because the two fighting beasts have been carefully raised. The masters have spent a lot of money to buy young beasts. During the growth process of the young beasts, there are servants in charge of their daily meals, spellcasters to induce their bloodlines, and beast tamers to provide training. In order to let the masters have a capital to boast, there are even people who clean their fur and teeth every day. The wrestling of two fighting beasts is actually a competition of the wealth of the masters behind them." Joseph concluded. He tilted his head and glanced at the scholar. "Piper, do you understand now?" "I understand." Piper nodded heavily. He sighed and said, "We are just beasts in a cage, and they're the high and mighty masters. How humiliating. It's not just us. Duke Infa of Fonin, Archduke Kane of Ols, Mayor of Nistu, Governor of Alanti, and even the so-called ruler of the entire territory, Tashammer, who is not the same." Joseph Lund's voice was distant, but his words were clear. If you want to blame someone, you can only blame yourself for not having enough power in your hands. "Oh, Piper, there's something wrong with what you said." The Marquis said softly, "We are not fighting beasts yet. I think the reason why the Northern Empire has not released a signal is because they want to see if we have the qualifications to be fighting beasts. It seems that we need to fight this war ourselves first." The scholar's throat was dry, and his voice was bitter. "With Vagers's strength alone, you want to face the entire Central Allied forces?" The Central Allied forces. Joseph Lund let out a mocking hiss. Tashammer was blinded by anger and rushed to Koer to reclaim the lost territory. Time is tight, and the other city lords will not join him so quickly. Right now, we only have to face Pudasius's troops. He was right. Although the Trade Federation was nominally governed by the ruler of the entire territory, every city lord had a main city, several castles, and a dozen or so villages. In their own territory, they had complete autonomy, and their ruling power was no different from that of king. Even if Tashammer was the head of the Federation, he could not directly mobilize the troops of other cities. Although the current Allied forces had a large number of people, it only looked powerful because no other city lord had joined. Apart from Tashammer and Pudasius's troops, the rest were not professional soldiers. Other than the most inconspicuous farmers and slaves, there were also mercenaries, wandering warriors, adventurers, and bounty hunters who were eager to plunder. When Pudasius issued the order to gather, they followed Tashammer's subordinate lords to serve him. "My lord, what do you plan to do?" the scholar asked. "Tashammer, that idiot, bringing along those useless fellows will only cause chaos. Assign a small number of troops to defend Koer. We will go south along the causeway and cross the swamp." Piper hesitated. "Take the initiative to attack." Joseph did not reply and continued. "After crossing the swamp, the cavalry will take the first step and secretly circle around to the rear of the Allied forces through the Tarta trade route. The infantry will continue to advance through the Avenue of Freedom. You want to split the troops into two and have the cavalry attack Tashammer's troops?" The scholar said with a frown, as if he did not agree with this tactic. "Piper, you are someone close to me, so you should know that we have a third army," Rune said. Joseph Lund said, "Once Tashammer knows that I have left Koer, he will definitely lead his army to fight with our main force. There are spies of Pudasius in Virgil's army. so he will focus on ambushing our cavalry. That will be Viper's chance. In order to make Shammer believe, we must send all the cavalry to the Tarta trade route. The cost of this bait is too high, the scholar said hesitantly. Even if we win this battle and beat back Shammer, when the other city lord's troops arrive, we will have no power to resist them. This is exactly what they want. I am guessing that when the other city lord's troops arrive, our allies will also arrive, the Marquis said with certainty. I am lying, Joseph said softly in his heart. He was not sure if his allies would arrive at that time, and he was not even sure if Virgil had any allies. Everything he said before was based on his own conjecture and had no basis in reality. However, these words could not be said out loud. As a city lord and as a commander, he had to appear confident at all times. Otherwise, under the immense pressure of the Trade Federation, Virgil's army might suddenly fall apart. Joseph Roon suddenly turned around and walked down the steps of the city wall. Piper, pass on my orders. Tell everyone to get ready. Come see me when everything is ready. Emperor Tangerine. The beasts in the arena were also divided into strong and weak. Choose carefully. Chapter 5:10. You said there are pirates in the West Sea? When he heard the news, Caesar was lying on the ground playing cards with Big Eye. Corgi, who had the memories of a god, was gifted in this aspect. Although he had just started learning, he could already fight evenly with the Black Dragon. He was the only one who could make Caesar fight seriously. It wasn't strange for pirates to appear in the Western Sea. As the estuary of the Blackwing Empire, countless large amounts of maritime trade had to pass through it. It was understandable for the thirsty skull flag to come after the wind. Schiller had once described it in a certain opera. Sometimes they are adventurers and mercenaries. Sometimes they are thieves and robbers. Once they see the shadow of profit, their hearts will float. If the profit is more than 50%, they will dare to take risks. If it is more than 100%, they will trample all the laws of the world. If it is more than 300%, they will dare to commit any crime, even if it means going to the gallows. Therefore, even though the Blackwing Empire had repeatedly attacked with iron blood, they were still unable to wipe out all the pirate groups in the West Sea. These skull flag would always appear from every corner. Attacking pirates had become the daily work of the Maritime Department, so there was nothing to be surprised about. Because of this, he was interrupted playing cards. The Black Dragon snorted and shook his head, feeling a little annoyed. They're not ordinary pirates. They're organized and planned to attack our ships. And these guys are not human, the first captain, Crendo Statham, said softly from below the throne. Is that so? Caesar heard this and looked at it seriously. He ended the game, put away the cards, and inserted them into the gap between the scales on his chin. Tell me the details. They're all creatures that live in the sea, such as amphibious merfolk, skeletal sharks, arthropods, and gigantic sea beasts. They're active in the east of the Calm Belt, including the 1st, 3rd, and 4th seas of Blackwing. They don't cross the Villister Sea. They attack all the merchant ships and transport ships that pass by, looting everything and leaving no survivors. 3 days ago, these guys attacked our military port at the Dun Islands. After that, we used all our forces to investigate and found that they had built a half-underwater, half-land fortress at the Scorched Rock Island in the First Sea. This is what our spell caster observed. It's the emblem of the fortress. As he spoke, Crinder took out a canvas from his sleeve. There were a few pale waves drawn on it. Deep Sea Kingdom. Corgi floated over, waving his tentacles as he stared at the emblem. Why are the enemies of the empire on which the sun never sets here? They made peace. Caesar grinned, revealing his sharp teeth. The unfalling empire must be jealous of the profits from Vilos. Now, these Oceanids have become their weapons against us. The name Deep Sea Kingdom was unfamiliar to the Northlanders, but it did not mean that it was a small, nameless country. On the contrary, the Deep Sea Kingdom had left its mark in history. They were once very powerful. At the end of the First Iradia era, traces of Oceanids' activities had already appeared on the continent. In the first 700 years of the Second Era, This country that constantly invaded the continent was the main opponent of the Achelonian Orc Empire. Perhaps the talents of the sea races were not as outstanding as those of the land creatures. Their intelligence and creativity were also incomparable to elves, dwarves, and humans. However, most of them were born with strong bodies. With their blood that was compatible with the ocean currents in their bodies, the sea race had a unique advantage over spellcasters when it came to controlling waves and storms. They were far better at controlling the unpredictable water and wind elements than those of the land creatures. On the surface of the sea, their combat ability was maximized. What should we do? Should we establish communication? Krender asked. The other party's intentions are obvious. There's no need to ask. Besides, even if we want to communicate, we can only do it after the battle. Caesar said casually, send the fleet to deal with it. If we just stop, those weapons will have no meaning. The Black Dragon ordered Hogg to arrange for the northern fleet to set sail, and at the same time, let Krender take over command of the fleet. It's best to be cautious. The large eyeball floated over, its tentacles spinning a few gold-plated dirge cards as it said quietly, the Deep Sea Kingdom is not a small country that rose up recently. They have a long history, and in the depths of an unknown territory, there may be more than one living demonic fish. Demonic fish? Caesar scratched his chin. He had never seen this species before, but he had seen it in the last few pages of Iradia's monster guide. It was a cruel and cunning aquatic species. Although it was called a fish, it was actually not a fish. Instead, it was a soft-bodied predator similar to the squid. From a certain point of view, the demonic fish had more outstanding talent and growth potential than the dragons. They would inherit all the knowledge of the previous generation when they were born, and at the same time, they could absorb the memories of the prey they digested. This caused the demonic fish to be hunters that loved to devour their prey, and at the same time had a high degree of intelligence. The demonic fish would usually enslave a large number of aquatic creatures. In some southern folklore, they were the kings of the Deep Sea Kingdom. Caesar recalled all the information about this species in his mind. After confirming that he had not missed anything, he snapped out of his thoughts. I understand. Arrange for the fleet to set sail. He still insisted on giving the order to Hogg, then turned to Krender and said, deal with the fortress on Scorched Rock Island first. If there are any other problems, report to the court immediately. Understood, replied the two in unison. Over the years, the Blackwing Empire had invested a lot in the military, and the Navy had never stopped building warships. After the Industrial Revolution, the strong industrial strength and technological reserve allowed the northern lands to create steel behemoths that far exceeded the current era. The Northern Fleet's ironclad warships were completely built with forged iron, and they also used all the new technologies of the northern lands, including magic systems, steam-powered hybrid engines, large-caliber breeches, watertight compartments, propellers, and anti-magic armor on the sides. Now, after many years of construction and replacement, the Blackwing Navy was mobilized in full force. Surging steam shrouded the sky, and the surface of the sea was torn apart by steel behemoths. Under the control of the sailors and the commanders of the subships, the Northern Fleet set off from the steam in the bay and headed southwest in a spectacular formation. As an ordinary navigator, there are too many things in the sea that we can't fight against, such as storms and sea monsters. When you see them, you can only choose to run for your life. But if you are in a steel warship, you will suddenly find that you can face them head-on and defeat them. Taken from Krender Statham's epic-making warship. Chapter 511. Chief Captain, the Magic Net system has detected a giant creature moving underwater ahead. It's estimated to be more than 20 meters long. Inform the guard fleet to deal with it. Krendo waved his hand casually, his brows furrowed as he stared at the map on the table. After a pause, he realized that the messenger was still standing at the door, so he turned around and asked, "Is there anything else?" "Yes." The messenger hesitated for a moment before saying, "Although we can't confirm its true intentions, some of the staff in the analysis department believe that It seems to be sending us some kind of message. Is that so? Crindo looked away from the map and thought for a while before saying, "Send a scout ship over to take a look." The scout ship that received the order quickly sped up, like a fish that had escaped from a school of fish. Scout ships were different from other ships. They were cheap to build, and in order to pursue speed and mobility, their lightweight hull was not made of wrought iron. Instead, the wooden hull was covered with a thin layer of armor, and they were much smaller than the regular Blackwing battleships. The scout ship was powered by magic steam-powered sails, and its speed was 3 to 5 times that of the Blackwing Empire's normal ships. It was also the fastest ship that Iradia knew of. 10 minutes later, the scout ship reached its destination at full speed. As usual, it set up a communication node, transmitted its coordinates to the fleet, and waited for further orders. The waves became unstable, and bubbles constantly emerged from the bottom of the water. Soon, a large creature emerged from the water and appeared in front of the Blackwing scout ship. A crab? This was the first thought that appeared in the minds of the scouts. The creature in front of them looked no different from the hairy crabs that humans ate. It had a dark red shell, 4 pairs of limbs, and 2 dancing pincers. The only difference was that it was hundreds or even thousands of times larger than a normal hairy crab. It rode the waves and sank a little when it got close to the scout ship. The seawater on its shell formed a whirlpool and finally condensed into the image of a woman. "You're trespassing on my territory." The woman's face, made of seawater, was expressionless as she stared at the small ship below. "Outsiders, please state your intentions." The scout ship immediately sent the message back to the fleet's command center. "Your territory?" Although he felt that his intelligence had been insulted, Kendo still maintained his greatest restraint. "This is the Blackwing Empire's territorial waters. Every island, every rock, every creature, and even every drop of water here belongs to the Blackwing Empire. No matter who you are, immediately remove the defensive measures on Scorched Cliff Island and lead your army to surrender to the Blackwing Empire. Wait for the Northern Royal Court's decision. Otherwise, we will use coercive measures. Warning, only death awaits you if you try to resist by force. I am King Ibstow of the Deep Sea Kingdom, Hilcanis." The woman's voice grew louder, echoing across the vast sea. "This is my territory. I don't care who you are." Croendo ignored her words and repeated what he had just said mechanically. "All right." The woman took a deep look at the small ship, and her body, which was made of seawater, suddenly dispersed. "Let's try it." The waves in Windward Bay were turbulent. The black bailer moved with the tide, and the ever-changing wind made the sails creak. The Knight and Gladiator were on both sides, and further away were the Wicked Woman, the Ocean Phantom, and the Butcher. The distance between the ships was less than 20 meters. It seemed that these idiots had learned how to maintain a formation. A&L felt a little annoyed. The rumbling of the bugle sounded across the sea, and the sound was hoarse and deep, like the whisper of the devil. The ships joined together. "Raise the mast, raise the sails, and get the oarsmen in position," A&L ordered. "Set sail." The crew hurriedly ran to their posts. The Black Bear was busy, and so were the other ships. Earlier, when they received orders that the enemy was about to arrive on the battlefield, Honor immediately ordered these bastards to get ready to fight a beautiful victory for his master. A&L looked to the southeast and stared at the Wicked Woman. Her sails were full of silver light, and the sail was covered with a skull silver crown that symbolized the Pirate King. A&L was almost as familiar with the Wicked Woman as he was with his own ship. She had 300 oars, and the sides of the deck were covered with ballistas. There were catapults at the bow, middle, and stern of the ship, which were used to throw burning barrels of oil. She was not only frightening, but also very fast and agile. 7 years ago, it was this ship that stood in front of him, exchanging fire with his own Black Bailer, causing him to be badly battered. However, things were hard to predict. Today, 7 years later, they had become allies, fighting side by side, serving the Deep Sea Kingdom together. To the people who made a living on the sea, whether it was the powerful Unfallen Dynasty or the newly risen Northern Empire, they were not as important as the deep sea kingdom in their hearts. This was because the former could only affect the land, while the latter controlled the entire sea. To the pirates, working for the deep sea kingdom not only gave them the right to travel freely on the sea, but also the blessing of the furious gods behind it. This was what A&L dreamed of. He felt a numbing itch in his right leg that had disappeared. Yes, the deep sea kingdom had given him the opportunity to earn this favor with his own efforts. "Line up," he shouted. The 100 oars of the black bailer entered the water at the same time. The oarsmen beat the drums loudly, and the sound of the drums was like the giant heartbeat of a monster. With every beat, the oars moved a little. The well-trained oarsmen moved as one. The knight and the gladiator next to them also spread their wooden wings at the same time. 6 of the 9 pirate kings from the Sea of Stars, the South Sea, and the Flaming Strait had come. The 6 ships moved at the same speed and sailed out of the Windward Bay together. Behind them were countless pirate ships and privateers. A&L heard the pirates cheering and encouraging each other across the sea. Ever since they were teleported to this place from the Sea of Stars by the Deep Sea Kingdom, they had been staying on an isolated island, cooped up in their cabins, doing nothing all day long. The pirates who were thirsty for blood could not wait to fight and plunder. They were full of confidence and firmly believed in victory. In this regard, A&L was different from the other pirate kings. He was a little worried. In terms of understanding of ships, oars, ballistae, and the coast, A&L could be considered as the best in the entire empire. He had also fought with blades and bathed in blood on wet and slippery decks before. However, today he felt that he had become the young boy who boarded a pirate ship for the first time. He was both nervous and scared. The main reason was that until now, the Deep Sea Kingdom had not revealed any information about the enemy. He only knew that he was going to face a fleet, but he did not know anything about the size of the fleet, its strength, who was the commander, and so on. However, the enemy that the 6 pirate kings had to deal with together was definitely not weak. A&L thought to himself. He continued to stare at the flag of the Wicked Woman. Under normal circumstances, pirates would never blow the horn or raise the flag. They would wait for an opportunity to approach the target at midnight. Once they smelled the signs of danger, they would turn the ship around and escape faster than the wind. If I were King Ibstow, I would definitely not do this. First, I would choose a few of the fastest pirate ships to surround the enemy and carefully investigate and spy on the situation. Before I know the specific information about the enemy, I would definitely not rush and so rashly. A&L had once mentioned this suggestion to King Ibstow, but it was rejected by Hill Canis expressionlessly. Wait a minute. Are we carrying out a mission to carefully investigate and spy on the situation? A terrifying thought suddenly appeared in A&L's mind. At the same time, his deputy reported that the fleet was about to arrive at the location designated by King Ibstow. Chapter 512. The sea was noisy, filled with roars, shouts, the vibrating sound of horns and flutes, the sound of hundreds of oars hitting the water, and the sound of sails and flags flapping in the wind. Everyone, observe the surroundings and maintain the formation, Ornell shouted. Olner shouted. A gust of sea breeze lifted up his old gray cloak. He was not wearing any armor, only a leather vest and a round bronze helmet by his feet. On the sea, heavy armor would not only not protect your life, it would also trap you. Every veteran sailor knew this, and so did the pirates. To be fair, being in such a large fleet, the confidence of the other pirates and privateers did not come without reason. Pirate kings like the Badass Woman and the Butcher were worthy of being called the overlords of the sea. They came and went like the wind in the Sea of Stars and the Southern Sea, and they were successful in every endeavor. They even dared to attack the magic ships of the unfallen empire. With these famous pirates gathered together, except for natural disasters, there was nothing that could scare them. Not many people who could summon the wind and rain on the sea were brainless idiots. Considering the current situation and the teleportation location, even if the Deep Sea Kingdom did not give a clear indication, they could roughly guess who their enemy was, the Northern Empire. However, even though they knew that their opponent was the Blackwing Empire that had accumulated a lot of power and influence, the captains did not back down. The Blackwing Empire was indeed powerful, but that was because of the Dark Emperor and his vicious kin. As for the navy of this country, the pirates really did not take it to heart. This was because they knew that a real fleet was not something that could be built with money and magic alone. In order to build a powerful fleet, the first thing one needed was the support of the shipbuilding industry and seafaring talents. However, the Blackwing Empire, which had been established for less than 100 years, obviously did not have the ability to do so. It was said that they had to recruit talents from the central continent and place orders to the inner sea cities. In the eyes of these pirates, the so-called fleet of the Blackwing Empire did not have any reputation or actual combat experience. It was just a sea caravan formed to open up the trade with Villister. At this time, the Badass Woman and the Black Bene were in position, and the Butcher of the Selgana Pirate King was also about to be ready. On the starboard side of the Butcher were the warships piloted by Selgana's 3 adopted sons, the Pain, the Wailing, and the Begging. Their decks were full of archers. The Fury was at the back, slowly approaching. It had 200 oars and the largest ram in the fleet, black like the head of a beast. This fleet spread out on the sea, quietly waiting for the enemy to arrive. Soon, in their magic vision, the pirates saw the appearance of their opponents. Goddess Umberlee, dozens of pirate ships almost immediately put away their flags, turned around, and fled towards the south. The pirate group did not have any unified will to speak of. Every pirate ship was an independent and equal individual in the group. Due to the difference in strength and the recognition of the strong, these pirates might usually obey the orders of the Pirate King, but in a matter of life and death, this loose group would lose the binding force of an individual. With a sharp and long whistle, the northern fleet emerged from the other side of the sea, riding the wind and waves. These huge, towering, heavily armed steel monsters were daunting. Through the magic vision, the pirates could see that the terrifying muzzles of the enemy were slowly turning and pointing at them from afar. There was no need to fight at all. The outcome was already decided. This was the thought that popped up in the minds of many pirates at this moment. Just as more and more pirates were prepared to follow the few pirates who reacted quickly and escaped together, thick and sturdy tentacles covered with fleshy suction cups stretched out from the sea and grabbed the few pitiful creatures who were escaping quickly, pulling them all into the deep sea. If Crendo had been observing this place, he would have recognized that this was the sea monster they had encountered on the voyage, Prodoc. In order to deal with this monster, he had spent a lot of effort and was almost burned to death by the anger of the Black Dragon Princess, Black Shia. No one is allowed to leave. Attack! The woman's voice echoed in the sea and entered the ears of every captain. The gods of wrath will protect you. Forward! In just a few seconds, Ornell was aware of his current situation. He roared, "Leave the formation first." The drums sounded like thunder, and the speed of the oarsmen's oars kept up. Wood chips flew on the surface of the water as the Black Banner left the formation, preparing to take a roundabout route to the enemy fleet. However, there was a ship that overtook it, and it was even faster than Ornell. It was Wayne Pirate King's Wicked Woman. Its 300 oars were as neat and precise as clockwork, and its flag, painted with a skull and a silver crown, fluttered loudly. The Wicked Woman was much faster than ships of the same class. It usually moved in the middle of the night, using the stealth runes carved by the masters on its hull to silently approach its target until it was side by side. Then, it would open fire to destroy the target, and then board the ship to kill all resistance. The terrible Wicked Woman was known as the Night Ghost in the Sea of Stars, and Captain Wayne was also known as the Ghost Captain. The sun seemed to have suddenly become a little brighter. Ornell raised his hand to block the sunlight from the west. He heard a roar in his ears, and when he focused his vision, the bad woman was nowhere to be seen. There was only a pile of burning wreckage on the surface of the sea. In just a short moment, no less than 100 cannonballs covered the area, like a giant net enveloping the Night Ghost, leaving the pirate pearl of the Sea of Stars here. Ornell's scalp exploded, and his disappearing right leg went numb. Naval warfare was complicated, but it was also simple. It was nothing more than a competition of whose cannons had a longer range and greater power, whose ship's defense was better, whose ship's speed was faster, whose logistics and intelligence system were better, and so on. Just a moment ago, the Blackwing Empire's fleet had shown its overwhelming advantage in range and power. The pirates had only just seen the outline of the enemy and had not realized the danger. The Batwoman had not even had time to enter combat speed when the steel behemoths had already opened fire and destroyed the target with precision. Those are not magic cannons, Ornell said to himself. Ornell told himself that the ships of pirate kings like Batwoman, Butcher, and Black Banar were equipped with a certain level of defense against magic-conducting weapons in order to prevent the Empire's navy from purging them. Whether it was a magic shield or something else, although the defense level of their ships was not high, at least they could withstand the bombardment of cannons for a while, giving the crew time to escape. However, this time, Ornell did not see the Batwoman take any defensive measures. It was directly destroyed, as if it had been crushed by a giant beast. Attack! The goddess of the sea and the lord of storms bless you. The clear command of Hill Canis sounded in his ears. It was not empty words. Ornell did feel that he had become energetic and fearless. King Abustos had cast a divine spell that affected the entire pirate group. Fortunately, the Deep-Sea Kingdom has not abandoned us. The pirates could not help but have this thought in their minds. The entire pirate group began to move forward. Their range was far inferior to the enemy's. They could only effectively kill the enemy when they were about 100 or even 50 meters away. What made Ornell feel relieved was that after the first round of attacks, the enemy's second round of attacks did not come. The fleet did the same thing as the pirate group. The steel behemoths were also moving forward. This made Ornell begin to doubt the ability of the enemy's commander. Was the enemy's brain damaged? Instead of using their huge range advantage, they took the initiative to close the distance with the pirates. Wait a minute, aren't those ships a little too fast? Ornell suddenly realized. Even if the wind was blowing, the enemy's speed was too fast. In less than a quarter of an hour, they had covered about twice the distance of the pirate group. What a monster! Although he had seen their appearance through the prying eye before, it was a completely different feeling to see their silhouettes gradually growing larger in his field of vision. Unlike the armored fleets in the south that had copper plates wrapped around their wooden hulls, these ships had a metallic luster to them. Even the strange chimneys and decks on the ships were the same. The heads of the ships were like sharp cones, splitting the seawater in half. Olna was an old pirate. Just by looking at the white waves that were created when the ships were pushed away, he could roughly estimate how fast these monsters were sailing. The Fury rushed forward. The blessing of the goddess of the sea made it look like a fearless warrior. Its captain, Pain, was indeed a fierce and tyrannical warrior. The Fury's fighting style was completely different from other pirate ships. It was not fast, and there were few crossbows and guns on the ship. The only thing it relied on was its ram and hull, the legendary ram and hull. Seemingly aware of Pirate King Pan on strategic intentions, the Northern Fleet sent a ship similar in size to the Fury to leave the fleet in an attempt to stop the Fury. This scene seems familiar. Ornell thought to himself. 2 years ago, he had his eyes on a treasure ship going to the Hajin Kingdom. Unfortunately, Pain beat him to it. He clearly remembered that the owner of the treasure ship sent a frigate to try to stop the Fury to buy time for himself to escape. In the end, the frigate was crushed into the sea by the Fury. Would the steel be able to stop the legendary ram? Ornell had doubts in his mind. The two ships collided. Under the dumbfounded gazes of the pirates, the black legendary ram was constantly deforming, emitting an ear-piercing sound of distortion, followed by the crisp sound of wood cracking. The Fury came to a sudden halt after colliding with the opponent, and then the entire hull began to tear apart. The towering hull seemed to have been cut by a knife, and both sides sank into the sea. The turbulent sea water surged up to the deck, and under the violent impact of the armor, many people were directly sent flying out along with the debris. The giant-class battleship Slicing Blade was the second-grade warship of the Blackwing Empire, just behind the three main ships Titan-class Empire Grasp, Northern Dawn, and Breath of the Holy Dragon. Ships of this class were mostly special warships used to carry out different missions. Battleship Slicing Blade, as its name suggested, had powerful, close naval combat ability. Its hull was specially made, using the same material as the Black Dragon Emperor's armor. The elemental black steel was known as the sharpest and hardest metal in Iradia. However, after testing by the Blackwing Research Institute, the elemental black steel was much more powerful than the elemental black steel. God. Looking at the Fury being cut in two, Honor could not remember how many times he had exclaimed. The enemy fleet had shocked him too much. After all, the Fury was still covered with the blessing of the goddess of the sea. He stared at the Fury that was slowly sinking into the sea, his hands and feet cold. Even if he could not see the scene on the ship, he could imagine that the Pirate King's flagship had been destroyed. The sailors who were rowing had undoubtedly suffered. It was already a good ending that they were not cut into pieces by the enemy. The worst was the crossbowmen and pirates who were stuck in the cabin and could not move. They could only drown alive as the seawater poured into the ship. What about Pirate King Pannon? He should not be dead yet. What was he thinking now? Cries, curses, screams, and cries for help were mixed together and then drowned out by the roar of the giant ship. It was like a pot of boiling water. Honor felt a chill down his spine. Even though the Black Banner was full of pirates who killed without blinking and were blessed by divine spells, the fear that had spread had swallowed them up. In the past, the pirates had stepped on the heads of others and shouted, but now they had become the prey. The battleship Slicing Blade looked undamaged and was still moving forward, but in fact, it was also injured. The enemy's toughness was beyond Crendo's expectations. Even though the Fury was destroyed, the battleship Slicing Blade also reported to the command center that the ship's bow was damaged, the balance cabin was leaking, the power system was in disorder, and many other malfunctions. It seemed that they would have to stay in the dock for a few months after returning home. However, this was enough. The fighting spirit of the pirates had dissipated with the destruction of the Fury, and the only thing left was a massacre. Honor had been at sea for many years, but this was the first time he had seen such a battle. The enemy's warship was rampaging, and it was ahead of his pirate ship in all aspects. The steel hull, unparalleled firepower, and unstoppable speed of these two fleets, which did not seem to belong to the same era, were immediately decided the moment they clashed. He gritted his teeth and was ready to order the Black Banner to open fire and board the ship, but he did not get the chance to do so. He chose to surrender. The screams and moans of the pirates floated in the air. The survivors had completely lost the will to fight. Even if the deep-sea kingdom threatened them with their lives, they still could not stop the pirates from fleeing into the depths of the sea. Even if they knew that it was still a dead end, they would rather die than endure this suffocating pressure. Warm-up complete. In the flagship of the Empire's grasp, Crendo clapped his hands and used the magic communication device to order the commanders of the other ships. Everyone, cheer up and prepare for battle. The sea folk are here. Chapter 5:13. Just like that, a pirate organization of an unprecedented scale was destroyed in one fell swoop. It was not that the Blackwing Empire did not have information on the Skull Flag ships from the south. Black Banar, Wrath, and Badwoman were all Pirate King ships that the people of the south and even the central continent were familiar with. They were unstoppable in the Sea of Stars and the South Sea, and could be said to be very famous. Even Kinder, who was in the north, knew very well who his opponent was. If it was in the past, being able to defeat or even defeat a pirate king would be something worth bragging about. However, things were different now. He was now the commander-in-chief of the Blackwing Empire's navy and had conquered Vilost under the orders of the Black Emperor. He had the strongest naval fleet in the world. Crendo's vision was no longer limited to the trivial matters between pirates. Instead, he focused on the competition between nations. The Deep Sea Kingdom had arrived. In fact, they had been waiting quietly underwater for a long time. Perhaps in their eyes, The pirates were just insignificant cannon fodder, or perhaps these alien races liked to see humans killing each other. In short, they did not assist the pirates in attacking the Northern Fleet. It was not until the pirate group was completely annihilated that the sea race finally took action. "Captain, something is attacking the bottom of our ship." There was no need for the report. Crendo could feel it himself. The bottom of the stable Empire grip main ship made clanging sounds, like metal colliding with each other underwater. No signs of life detected around the fleet. The technician controlling the Magitech system reported. "A school of swordfish," Crendo muttered. Before the Northern Fleet set off, Caesar had given them a set of information about the deep-sea nation from Corgi. There were some commonly seen species of the sea tribe recorded in it. The underwater long-range attack made Crendo think of the swordfish. They were the archers of the deep-sea kingdom. They could shoot out bone spikes about 1 meter long from their heads. According to the information, they could easily pierce through the body of a tiger shark. "Prepare to release the jellyfish," Crendo ordered. Jellyfish was a name given by the Black Emperor. It was a new weapon created by the Northern Empire in order to gain supremacy in the sea. It was made of enchanted copper shell and iron frame. The first generation was about 10 meters in size and looked like a floating jellyfish. There was a ballast tank inside that allowed it to carry people underwater. Through horizontal and vertical propellers, it could carry several high-explosive bombs as weapons. All crew members are in position. The inspection work has been completed. The jellyfish is in good condition. There are no signs of life around the fleet. The seawater is stable. You could drop jellyfish. I repeat, you could drop jellyfish. The technician's voice was calm. "I'm Crendo." Crendo opened the communication channel with the fleet. "I'll order all the ships to activate the magic barrier and release the jellyfish." On the vast sea, the Northern Fleet, in formation, activated the magic barrier for the first time. Dark curtains of light were released from the magic cores of the various ships and finally connected into one. At the same time, after using the magic barrier to block the bone spike attack of the swordfish, the diving tanks at the bottom of the ships opened. The jellyfish, which seemed to be loaded with heavy objects, instantly fell into the dark sea. White bubbles could be seen surging out from both sides of the ships. That was the air released from the sealed tanks that the jellyfish were in. What are they doing? In the distance, Canis, who was on the head of the giant sea monster Prodoc, narrowed her eyes. The swordfish's attack shouldn't be able to penetrate the armor of the ships. Why are they releasing the magic barrier? Her legendary level vision allowed her to clearly see the bubbles surging out from both sides of the ships. Canis thought for a moment and used a finger to lightly poke Prodoc's head. She communicated with the swordfish telepathically. "I suspect that the humans have launched some unknown attack. The swordfish have temporarily retreated. Let the armored whales approach and take a look." Mino glanced at the display panel and reported to the messenger who was connected to him, 35 meters deep. "The situation is stable. Jellyfish 13 is working normally." "Roger that. Please continue diving." "Yes." He looked up through the observation window at the top. He could only see the pitch-black bottom of the frigate North Wind, surrounded by bluish-black seawater. The last rays of light were concentrated on the flashing indicator light of the deep diving cabin. The faint light seemed to be projected from an hourglass. The jellyfish seemed to be sinking in the hourglass. In the end, even the faint light disappeared completely. The moment it sank into the darkness, Mino couldn't help but shiver. "This doesn't feel good," he muttered to himself. As one of the first batch of deep divers, Mino had already operated this jellyfish 13 to test dives many times. None of them had failed. However, when it really sank into the deep sea of an unknown region, the feeling it brought was completely different from when it was a test dive. When the surroundings were completely dark, he couldn't see anything anymore. Everything in the world was leaving him. All that was left was the bone-chilling seawater and the strange fish that surrounded him, ready to devour him at any time. This feeling was torture and suffocating every second. If the sea tribe discovered them, would the jellyfish be able to withstand their attacks? Mino thought to himself, probably not, right? he suddenly felt a little afraid. He even had the thought of escaping at the last minute. At this moment, Mino finally understood what the Black Emperor meant when he said to the Red Lotus Goblin, "This kind of deep-diving tool is far from enough. We need something faster and bigger that can be compared to the Titan-level warship or even the Dominator-level warship that has yet to appear. Only in such a deep-diving tool could one be fearless against the monsters in the deep sea." However, what would such a deep-diving tool look like? Mino couldn't imagine it. Time passed slowly as the machinery operated and the air whizzed. The jellyfish had already reached a depth of a few hundred meters. At this moment, the indicator light on the workbench suddenly blinked. Jellyfish detected by A13 that have a strong energy reaction. They are huge and are estimated to be from the sea tribe. Their numbers are unknown. Reporting their position now, Mino immediately connected to the communication system and said hurriedly, "In the cold and silent deep sea, an accident was a pleasant surprise. Roger that. Please use concealment measures and continue to observe. Wait for the other jellyfish to arrive." Before the order was given, Mino had already activated the concealment device. Jellyfish A13 was completely silent. At the same time, the concealment runes on its surface took effect and merged with the seawater. "They are swimming in an orderly manner. They seem to be looking for something," Mino reported. "They are searching for jellyfish." Commander Kindo's voice was transmitted directly into the deep-diving tool. "It was my mistake. There was a flaw in a certain point that caused the other party to realize that we have sent something in." Almost the moment Kindo finished speaking, Mino saw that one of the densely packed signal lights on a 13th control panel had gone off. That was the emergency contact light between the jellyfish. Someone had disconnected. Had we been discovered? Mino wondered. Very quickly, a new order came from the communication center. "Attention, the jellyfish have been discovered. A large number of people of the sea are approaching your area. Surface immediately. The fleet will release depth charges in 5 minutes to clean up the water. I repeat, all jellyfish must surface immediately and leave." The order was interrupted by a piercing alarm. A holographic projection screen appeared in front of Mino, behind him, to his left, and to his right. Densely packed red dots were approaching jellyfish A13. On the cross-sectional plan, there were 3 red dots moving in this direction on the same horizontal plane. Damn it! Mino punched the control panel. He changed the settings and floated up at full speed. Although the jellyfish was the first product of the Blackwing Empire, it did not mean that it was a crude and inferior product. On the contrary, even with Caesar's foresight, the combination of industrial technology and magical alchemy, the jellyfish was a rather perfect underwater weapon. As long as the pilot operated it properly, a few armored whales would not pose much of a threat. For example, right now, Mino had released a high-explosive bomb that slowly floated toward the armored whale that was circling around. The bomb detonated at its jaw, and the armored whale that was trying to block his way was instantly flipped over. It was badly mutilated and completely dead. According to the estimation, Jellyfish 13 would reach the protection zone of the north wind in 4 minutes and return safely. Chapter 514. Mino adjusted the power output to the maximum. The spare mana core provided energy to the propeller at maximum power. The airtight compartment discharged the seawater, and the jellyfish rose rapidly. Even at full power, 13 was still operating smoothly. The airflow made a soft humming sound as it passed through the valve. The indicator on the dashboard jumped, and all the values were within a reasonable range. Without a doubt, this was indeed a sophisticated deep-diving machine. However, the underwater vibration caused by the explosion of the armored whale caused a chain reaction. Seawater was an excellent sound conductor. The loss of sound waves was smaller than in the air. This allowed the sea tribe, who were deeper and farther, to discover this target. Soon, a large number of fish followed the sound and swam over. Damn it! Mino stared at the dashboard that displayed various operating conditions. Suddenly, he cursed, "Defense? There's a spellcaster among these Ned Fish. As a student who had successfully graduated from the Imperial Military Academy, even an ordinary person was required to have the knowledge and ability to distinguish magic. When jellyfish A13 lost its direction and its horizontal axis could not be calibrated, Mino immediately sensed that something was wrong. He tried his best to escape. However, he was still one step too late. At a depth of 800 meters, the deep-diving device could no longer rise. A spellcaster had created a defense to seal off this area, blocking his way. A spellcaster has been found among the Sea Tribe. The area above 13 has been sealed off. Please check, he reported. His eyes were fixed on the rapidly approaching fish. It seemed that these Sea Tribe members were working together and saw him as a prey that they had to catch. Mino clenched his teeth. He knew that he would die if he did not do anything. There was no time to wait for a response from the command center. He decided to give it a try. He did not try to rise anymore. Instead, he controlled the deep-diving device to descend rapidly. The oxygen tank was an enchanted equipment. The amount of oxygen it contained was much more than expected. It could support his underwater activities for a long time. If he could sink to the bottom of the sea and avoid the Sea Tribe's line of sight, he might have a chance to survive after the fleet was cleaned up. The feeling of supergravity suddenly disappeared, and what followed was a feeling of weightlessness. Jellyfish A13 was falling to the bottom of the sea, and the depth chart rose rapidly. Mino knew very well that if he wasn't inside the jellyfish, the terrifying water pressure in the deep sea would have killed him immediately. Only legendary warriors could survive in such an environment. Jellyfish A13. The North Wind is attempting to remove the lock. It is estimated that it will be completed in 1 minute. Please prepare to return. At this time, the voice of the radio operator finally came. I'm currently sinking to avoid the Sea Tribe, Nuo reported. If everything goes well, I hope to return after the cleansing is complete. There was silence on the other end of the communicator. Clearly, the command center understood A13's current situation. After a short pause, a reply came through the channel. Roger that. The North Wind will release 10 Thunderfish to assist you. Keep in touch. The Thunderfish was a type of underwater precision-guided weapon. Its prototype was the self-destructing puppet fish of the Southern Empire. Its remote-controlled, time detonation characteristic won Caesar's favor. Thus, after the Blackwing Weapon Research Institute's dedicated research and repeated improvements, the Goblins added more industrial attributes to it, making it more suitable for mass production. They renamed it Thunderfish. Nowadays, this kind of weapon had been equipped with the Empire's naval fleet on a large scale. The soldiers called it the Shadow Killer to describe its small size, flexibility, and great power. Understood. Nuo felt more assured after hearing the command center's arrangements. After the North Wind finished breaking through the defense, the Thunderfish quickly reached where Jellyfish A13 was. The submersible vessel continued to sink. 1,500, 1,800, 2,200. Logically speaking, the Sea Tribe should be staying in the shallow waters, waiting for an opportunity to attack the fleet. However, what Nuo did not expect was that as he gradually sank to the bottom, the Sea Tribe surrounding him did not decrease. Instead, they increased. The deep sea, which was supposed to be pitch black, gradually became brighter. Clear light shone through the observation window. The color of the water was like a flowing silver glow. The Thunderfish exploded around the submersible vessel one after another to fend off more and more demon-hunting sharks and armored whales. Through the naked eye, Nuo saw a gigantic crimson squid waving its tentacles. The ends of the tentacles were filled with the glow of magic. It was obvious that this monster had built the defense in the waters below the fleet from a long distance away. Nuo became uneasy. His forehead was covered in cold sweat. Thud, thud. The submersible vessel was hit. The 10 Thunderfish that followed him down had already been used up. Here, he saw the target of his initial mission, a school of spear swordfish. These Sea Tribe members had strange mouths that were shaped like long darts. Their bodies were long and slender, and they swam extremely fast. They flashed past his vision. Thud! The spear swordfish's attack. The submersible shook violently, and the iron frame on the surface of the submersible made a teeth-numbing sound. The surging water slapped on the shell of the jellyfish, and the whole sea was stirred up by the shoals of fish. Schools of swordfish quickly flashed across the horizon, and huge armored whales appeared one after another. Demon-hunting sharks also entered the range of the submersible. The dark steel tanks installed on both sides of jellyfish, 13, were damaged. The steel walls of the deep-sea oxygen tanks that the Empire had prepared for jellyfish were a few centimeters thick. They were also enchanted. However, they were still the weakest part of the submersible vessel. They could not withstand the spear swordfish's attack. After being hit, a few holes were torn open, and the oxygen escaped through the cracks. Minu suddenly realized why he was surrounded the moment he was discovered. Armored whales, demon-hunting sharks. Countless sea tribe members rushed over immediately. There was even the spell-casting squid to help. It turned out that the gathering place of the sea tribe was below. A slender figure was swimming in the clear water. Its long tail was swaying slowly, and its movements were calm and unhurried. However, anyone could see that it could burst out with astonishing speed at any time, rushing towards its target like an arrow. It was a giant demon-hunting shark. Its whole body was covered in a deathly white bone shell. It was hard to imagine that such a creature existed in the ocean. When it appeared, the other sea tribe members consciously avoided it. It looked like the leader of the demon-hunting sharks. Crack, crack. The leader of the demon-hunting sharks had its eyes on the jellyfish. It pounced over quickly, opened its mouth, and bit the tail of the submersible vessel. It swung its jaws and tore at it. The jellyfish shook violently, and the propeller made a cracking sound. After a while, it released its jaws and flung the submersible vessel away. It was tossed to the sharks that were waiting nearby. They teased the submersible vessel as if they were competing for their prey. There was a leak in the oxygen supply tank, a leak in the watertight compartment, a breakdown in the transmission system, a failure in the engine. The warning light on the main control panel flashed crazily. Minuan knew that the submersible vessel had lost the ability to return. A-13, we received a distress signal from the submersible vessel. Please report your situation. An urgent voice came from the communicator. I'm fine. Minua gave a simple reply. Then, he unilaterally turned off the communication with the command center. At this time, he guessed that the sea tribe members were probably using sound to locate his location. Thus, he fumbled around and cut off the engine. He closed all the valves, leaving only the magic patterns on the jellyfish to hide. Then, he continued to sink like a rock. Although he could not return, he still wanted to do something before he was completely torn apart. 3,100, 3,400, 4,200. Light shone in from the porthole. He saw rows of deep-sea murlocs, sea dragons with mouths full of sharp teeth, acid squid that oozed venom, and many other species that he could not name. The needle on the depth chart swayed. Jellyfish 13 floated in the deep sea with difficulty. It tilted slightly. All the lights on the instrument panel flickered for a while before they were all extinguished. The magic core that flickered also stopped working. The cockpit was filled with the sound of airflow. Minua knew that this first-generation submersible vessel of the Blackwing Empire had done all it could. Now, it was sleeping peacefully. He slumped into the seat tiredly. The lack of oxygen made it difficult for him to move. He groped around sluggishly and found the independent single-line communicator in the cockpit. He dialed. North Wind. This is 13. As if understanding his current situation, the quiet and cold communicator's voice seemed to have become gentle. Roger that. Go ahead. I have entered the hinterland of the sea tribe. Please locate my depth coordinates and clear the target. I repeat, clear the target. After a moment of silence, the voice on the other end of the communicator said, the message has been sent to the command center. You, Minua, whose brain was lacking oxygen, could no longer hear the other party's response clearly. He squinted his eyes and muttered to himself in a daze, "I may not be able to return this time. All of you must work hard." Okay. For the Empire. For the Empire. Chapter 515. Positioning complete. Weapon cleaning has been activated. Removing safety lock. Please enter the passcode. Crendo stared at the signal of jellyfish A13 before it disappeared. With a cold expression, he entered the passcode that only he knew of into the Magitech system and ordered the launching of the underwater weapons carried by the Empire's grasp. Only Meow Meow and a few others knew that before the Northern Fleet set sail, Hogg had been ordered by the Emperor to place a secret weapon on the Empire's grasp, the Annihilation Sphere disguised as an underwater bomb. It did not come from the Black Dragon, but from Odin. With Caesar's ability, he could of course create a weapon more powerful than this. However, due to the pollution in Caesar's energy, if he were to throw the nuclear weapon into the sea, the entire Imperial Sea would probably be polluted. Furthermore, it would spread to land through the atmosphere. It was not worth it to do this in his own territory. Therefore, in the end, Odin's Annihilation Sphere became the trump card of the Northern Fleet. The time is 4:25 p.m. I am the fleet's commander-in-chief, Crendo Statham. I order the launching of the weapon cleaning, Crendo said. The frigates will set up a defensive net to prevent any possible counterattacks. The orders were quickly carried out. The Northern Fleet set up the deep-sea bombs in a spiral pattern. These bombs would automatically float in the sea at a depth of 100 meters, forming a complete defensive net. They were originally designed to deal with ambushers sent by the enemy, but now they were used to intercept things deeper in the sea. At the same time, the pitch-black weapon compartment of the Empire's grasp flagship silently opened. A rusty iron box silently fell out. The first layer of its outer shell was peeled off when it was 500 meters underwater, and then the second layer was peeled off when it was 1,000 meters underwater. Sink, sink. In the end, it turned into a metal ball the size of a human fist. It slowly and inconspicuously reached the predetermined location. Around it were groups of deep-sea frogmen, demon-hunting sharks, and swordfish, as well as the casting crimson cuttlefish and ferocious sea dragons. It was detonated. Black flowers bloomed in the water. This was the most condensed state of Odin's annihilation energy. The flowers spun slowly in the sea for a second and then immediately collapsed. What followed was a terrifying annihilation storm. A large number of creatures were instantly vaporized. The frogmen were turned into ashes immediately. The huge armored whales were turned into dust before they could even make a sound. The sea dragons fled like crazy, but they still could not escape from the Reaper's scythe. The black hole roared in the deep sea, as if a demon from another world was letting out a terrifying roar. "Kill rate of 42%, Crender whispered. "They're coming." At this time, in the central control room of the Empire's grasp, the projection showed the results of the magic scan. After suffering a sudden attack, the remaining sea folk were rapidly rising from the bottom of the sea. They swore to take revenge like crazy. The barrier formed by the depth charges was 100 meters underwater. The dense light formed a net-like structure, waiting for the sea folk to pounce. In the next moment, the sea folk that were rapidly floating up collided with the barrier formed by the deep-water bombs. These bombs would explode upon contact, and each one would release a powerful shockwave and thousands of enchanted steel balls. The trajectory of these steel balls and shockwaves would form a perfect sphere, cutting apart every creature that came into contact with it. People saw a dazzling scene below the surface of the sea, as if fire was rising from the bottom of the sea. A second later, the shockwave of the depth charges had reached the surface of the sea, and white waves soared into the sky. "Get ready!" The commanders of the various ships roared. The searchlights lit up like the boiling sea. Bullet chains slid into the barrels of the guns. The main cannons of the ships were preheated, and the cannons were ready to fire. Everyone's eyes were on the surface of the sea. The blue sea roared angrily, and the steel fleet swayed along with it. It was as if there was a great force accumulating below that could tear the sea apart at any time. The sea folk tore apart all obstacles, wanting to fight the warships head-on. Attack! In the next second, various creatures jumped out of the sea from the white waves. There were demon-hunting sharks with long tails, amphibious fishmen with tridents in their hands, as well as armored whales and giant sea monsters that could even move the ships. Using the huge impact of the explosives, they jumped 5 to 10 meters above the sea surface like predatory beasts, hoping to climb up to the deck and kill the humans on the steel warships. However, at the instant they were about to emerge from the water, the guns installed on the ships had already begun to fire. After so many years had passed, the weapons and equipment of the Blackwing Empire had already undergone an upgrade. These guns were all new weapons, with 48 gun barrels fixed within a cylinder. The gunner could fire 48 bullets at a time through a joystick. Furthermore, the gunner only needed to change the locking block to complete the reloading operation. After actual combat testing, a skilled gunner could even reach a terrifying firing rate of 250 bullets per minute under the operation of this type of gun. The rain of bullets poured from the warships onto the sea surface, almost immediately tearing the poor frogmen into pieces. Dense sparks burst out when the bullets hit the hard bodies of the demon-hunting sharks. Many of the demon-hunting sharks were forced back into the sea by the rain of bullets. The thunderfish of the frigates had already been fired. This weapon had proven to be outstanding. It was delicate, flexible, and powerful. It drew a white mark on the surface of the sea, and after a precise guidance, it completed the explosion. The main cannons of the warships were the main weapons, and there was no doubt about their power. Just the violent flames and deafening sounds were enough to frighten the creatures in the sea and make them flee. The wind and clouds on the sea suddenly changed. Dark clouds gathered and thunder clouds rolled. King Busto was no doubt the god of wrath. She entrusted her divine power to change the weather, changing the climate to a more suitable environment for the sea folk to fight. Attack continue. There was no time to set up a network of bombs, so the sea folk that came next were not stopped at all. Thousands of figures jumped out of the water again, and the fleet suffered casualties for the first time. Some of the demon-hunting sharks turned their bodies and landed on the warships. They used their sharp fangs to bite the flaming cannons, twisting the cannons out of shape. The cannons immediately exploded, and the gunners were swallowed by the flames. The injured demon-hunting sharks took advantage of the shock wave to fall back into the sea and immediately dove deeper. The steel warships spewed out deadly flames. Their voices were louder and more impassioned than the screams of the sea folk. The sea was shaken by the terrible roars of this fleet, and shells after shells sank to the bottom of the sea with the sea folk. The concentrated machine guns of the Save stopped firing, and so did the main cannons. Seawater splashed onto the red-hot barrels of the guns, producing hissing sounds of quenching. There is a limit to the weapons produced by the current industrial level, and if they were used anymore, they would explode. However, the Save did not stop. The steam turbines operated at maximum power, and the warships spewed out white smoke. All weapons were fired, including armor-piercing bullets, anti-air missiles, and disruptive turbulence. These weapons were not suitable to be used against the sea folk, but there was nothing to be said at this point. The so-called battle to the death was to throw stones at the enemy. Launch the guided missiles, all of them, Kendo said. Win the war at all costs. Thousands of guided missiles slid into the launch rails from the magazine and were fired on the spot. Flames rose one after another under the black sky. These first-generation guided missiles rose and fell, and flames rose on the sea. The sea folks' roars sounded like they were crying, and their attacks were getting weaker and weaker. Chapter 5:16. The attack of the sea folk came to an end. They screamed unwillingly, but under the orders of their leader, they had no choice but to retreat into the sea. The sea was filled with broken corpses and wreckage. The blood-stained battleships were anchored in the ruins, and steam rose into the air. The sea became even calmer. All the enemies had escaped into the water, but Krendo was not at ease. He stared at the surface of the sea where there were no more living creatures. His back trembled, and uneasiness brewed in his heart. The leader of the sea folk, Hill Canis, still had not appeared. Were they planning to retreat in such a hurry? Before the soldiers of the fleet could cheer for their victory, a bright bolt of lightning flashed above their heads, illuminating Crendo's gloomy face before disappearing. "How dare you slaughter the people of the sea like this?" A rumbling voice came from the bottom of the sea. "Now, only destruction awaits you. Feel the anger of the furious gods." The surface of the sea that was hidden in the dark clouds suddenly lit up as if it was on fire. The intersection between the sky and the sea was especially bright, as if the sun had appeared on the surface of the sea. Then, it was as if a divine palace had floated up in the sea. The bright palace was brighter than any mirage, and the sky and sea were illuminated by the palace into a dazzling white. "Divine kingdom," someone in the fleet murmured in a daze. Thunder and lightning flashed in the sky, and the waves on the sea were like walls. Amidst the sound of the whirlpool, a nightmarish figure appeared on the waves. She looked like a blue-green female with only the upper half of her body, but she was as majestic as a titan. She wore a top made of shells and a purple cloak made of jellyfish. Her fingertips were sharp, and her elbows were fins. Her eyes were as white as pearls, and her hair was made of seaweed that danced in the wind. The goddess of the ocean, Umberlee. Amidst the terrified cries of the people, the temperature on the sea plummeted, and a snowstorm arrived. The harsh winter shrouded the area, and the remaining flames on the sea were immediately extinguished. Another god revealed her true appearance. It was the beautiful and cruel goddess of winter, Uller. She appeared in the snow and looked at the mortals on the sea with a cold gaze. She had arrived together with the goddess of the ocean. As if the people on the ground were not desperate enough, two huge blood moons rose from the sea. They were not moons, but the eyes of a giant beast. The god of the hunt, Malor, appeared on the other side of the sky, bringing with him an unparalleled smell of blood. He greedily sized up the living people on the fleet, his sharp teeth grinding. In the divine kingdom further away, the lightning marks shone brightly. That was the divine emblem of Talos. Although the Lord of Storms and Calamity had not appeared, he was still watching the battlefield from afar. It was no exaggeration to say that the furious gods had all stepped into the battlefield. Winter, tsunamis, storms, and catastrophes. The gods used their unparalleled power to control everything on the ground. The steel fleet swayed like a small boat in the tide. Everyone could not help but shiver in the harsh winter. The wind and rain splashed on the deck of the ships, and every ship let out an ear-piercing alarm. Umberlee's pale eyes were lifeless. She did not say a word. She gently raised her hand and pulled out an ancient rusty trident. Then, without any fancy moves, she thrust it forward. The furious tsunami surged with the goddess of the ocean's movement. The seawater gathered into a huge, flowing trident. The tip of each wave was sharp, and it rushed toward the shaking North Sea fleet. "Activate the protective shield," Crendo shouted in the rain. With the Empire's grasp as the center, the magic cores of every warship were overloaded. They jointly raised a layer of dark protective shield to protect the fleet. The seawater, full of divine power, crashed into the protective shield of the fleet. The front of the shield shattered into scattered waves, but the seawater behind immediately followed, violently pouring into the dark shield. The smaller patrol ships were the first to let out a sharp whistle, followed by the frigates, destroyers, and giant-class battleships. Their magic cores had been overclocked and exploded, causing permanent damage. On the other side, the noisy seawater also came to an end. The divine power contained in the goddess of the ocean's attack had finally been exhausted. "Is this a god?" Crendo's lips trembled as he looked at the report on the hull of the Empire's grasp. Although the magic core of the main ship was not destroyed, it was exhausted and could not be used again. It needed to be returned to the Empire's headquarters to recharge before it could be activated again. As the captain of the ship, no one knew better than Crendo how high the defense level of the main ship was. The Empire's grasp, Northern Dawn, and breath of the Holy Dragon were the symbols of the Blackwing Empire's dominance on the sea. They were the embodiment of the Empire's best industrial technology and magical engineering standards. They were built at an immeasurable cost. However, these painstaking efforts of the Empire had been completely destroyed by a single attack from a god. Crindo felt that his faith had suffered a huge blow. However, what he did not know was that this scene was an even bigger blow to the gods. It was not that there were no things in the astral world that could fight or even defeat the gods, such as the Titans, evil creatures, abominations, and legendary dragons. However, those that could fight against the gods with foreign objects were all famous things in the vast history, such as the Alliance of Stars, the Arcane Empire, and the Quel'Dorii race in the Iradia continent recently. These terrifying mortal organizations had a common name in the eyes of the gods: civilization. In the eyes of the gods, these civilizations were no different from hatred, evil creatures, and even abyssal demons. They were all enemies of the gods that were extremely difficult to deal with. Therefore, the scene that had just unfolded had shocked them even more. The Blackwing Empire had manifested the embryonic form of a brand new civilization. Even the evil, chaotic, and furious gods had realized that they had to nip this bud in the bud in the bud. Hunt, slaughter, Malor growled. This beast's thoughts were not as rich as the other gods. It was filled with a boiling desire to kill. After conspiring with Tiamat to plot against the god of war, this beast had obviously gained many benefits and had become stronger. Unknowingly, the northern fleet in the sea had turned white. Ice and snow covered the guns and cannons, sealing the entire fleet in ice. These mortals did not even have a chance to escape, let alone fight back. Crindo stared at the gods in the sky in despair. He moved his frozen fingers and gripped his sword tightly. His throat moved as he used all his strength to shout, "Everyone prepare for battle. Everyone must die." The cold laughter echoed in the icy sea. The god of Hunt had transformed his head into a giant black wolf. He opened his mouth like a black hole, wanting to swallow the entire northern fleet in one fell swoop. "Long time no see, Malor." Before the voice of the god of Hunt had completely dissipated, another deep voice sounded. "I say, you guys came to visit Iradia. Why didn't you come to see me first? What's the meaning of bullying mortals?" Chapter 517. Caesar. Malor turned around warily. A pitch-black crack appeared in the sky, and the crack was filled with chaos and turbulence. The black dragon stretched out its sharp front claws, and then it tore the crack open as if it was expanding. The crack that was a few miles long stretched across the sky, and a huge body squeezed out from it. The giant dragon flapped its wings and confronted the gods, floating above the frozen fleet. La Emperor had the ability to shatter space. After using this move to deal with Lich King Aglarin, Caesar had gained a lot of inspiration. He already knew how to use his own power to tear space apart and teleport, and even travel between planes. "Your Majesty," Croendo opened his mouth. The black dragon's golden eyes narrowed as he stared at the lightning emblem in the depths of the divine palace. "Controlling the sea tribe is your business, but you shouldn't interfere in the war of mortals. Who do you think you are, the ruler of Iradia?" Malor growled sarcastically. Ever since the spatial crack appeared, the black dragon had only stared at the emblem in the depths of his divine kingdom. He did not look at the three gods who had appeared. However, when Malor finished speaking, he suddenly turned his head and glanced at where the black-blooded beast was. Emperor's decree immediately took effect. In the space there seemed to be cut into pieces by countless knives. Malor's projection also disappeared in an instant. "Watch your words," Caesar said casually. "This is a small warning." Malor, who had reformed his body, was about to explode in anger. It would have been fine if the black dragon had argued with him verbally, but the other party looked down on him and did not take him seriously at all. This made Malor so angry that he wanted to roar. No creature in the prime material plane had ever dared to treat him like this. He was the god of the hunt, the king of beasts. However, what Malor did not want to admit was that while he was angry, there was also some fear and worry in the depths of his thoughts. Since when had this dragon become so powerful? He was so powerful that he could shatter his own incarnation without him being able to react. In just one exchange, he had already lost a portion of his divine power. Of course, this was not enough to make Mailer retreat. Even though he was a god, he was still a beast. When a beast was hurt, it would become even crazier and more hysterical. The divine palace behind him gave him the confidence to roar at Caesar. The avatars of the other two gods, Umberlee, the goddess of the sea, and Oler, the goddess of winter, were also becoming clearer and more active. They were pouring more divine power into the Eladian Prime material plane. Obviously, these gods did not intend to leave so easily. If that's the case, Caesar flapped his wings, dispelling all magical damage inflicted on the frozen fleet below. Let me test the toughness of the raging gods. Thus, the battle broke out. The battle between the black dragon and the gods was far from what the mortals of this world could hope to see. The northern fleet could only retreat far enough to ensure their safety. Only then did they dare to watch the battle through the telescopes on the ships. "Quick, use the gemstones to record it," Cronor excitedly said to his deputy. Kindo said excitedly to his assistant, "If we can preserve the image of His Majesty fighting against the gods, the people in the publicity department will definitely kneel down and beg us." If the gods were rational enough, they would have realized that pouring divine power into Iradia was meaningless. They couldn't kill Caesar, this was without a doubt. But even if they realized this, the proud gods of raging gods were not willing to give up so easily. Their chaotic and evil nature made them happy to fight against a super godlike dragon. Umberlee blocked Caesar's attack with a huge wave. With the support of the sea, her avatar's physique and strength were not to be underestimated. This was also the reason why she could block Caesar's attack. Because of the iron armor, the black dragon's weight was more than 50,000 tons. His 70-meter-long body was charging at a speed of hundreds of kilometers per hour. To withstand such a force was no different from holding up a falling mountain. But Umberlee was able to do it, which was somewhat beyond Caesar's expectations. The power of the sea is limitless. This seemingly fragile female god used a hand made of water to block the black dragon. At the same time, she waved a huge rusty trident towards Caesar's body. The trident collided with the black dragon's scales with a loud sound. The force of the impact almost caused Umberlee's divine power to collapse, and she couldn't maintain the shape of the weapon in her hand. The black dragon groaned. Umberlee's weapon was sharp enough to make him feel pain. After so many years, Caesar finally felt the thrill of battle once again. The sea god slashed his scales with a huge trident, and the black-blooded beasts pounced on him and bit his carapace. This kind of pain and pleasure was definitely not something that he could experience when fighting the Lich, who only knew how to use weak magic to hide. The dragon's blood gradually boiled, and Caesar let out an excited roar. The blood brought by close combat instantly cleared away his boredom of doing nothing all day long, and let the black dragon experience his own fresh life once again. An evil dragon born from blood and fire would eventually return to blood and fire. "Come on, all of you together!" Caesar shouted excitedly, his mouth full of burning flames. In the eyes of mortals, this was an epic battle. The black dragon began to swing its battering ram-like tail. At the same time, its steel-like jaw also became a ramming weapon. The dragon opened its mouth wide and began to bite. Its mind was filled with thoughts of melee combat, and it had forgotten all about psionic powers and laws. It was the same for the gods of Berserk, but they were forced to do so. Everyone knew that divine spells and magic could not harm this dragon. It had been a long time since Caesar had fought to his heart's content. Whenever it was his turn, he would settle his problems with a single breath. It was rare that his opponents, such as the infernal Lord Azrael's and the Lich King Aglarin, did not have the ability to engage in close combat with him. However, the battle prowess of the gods of fury was unexpectedly strong. The winter god used ingenious footwork to avoid the black dragon's heavy blows several times. The sea god was able to contend with him in terms of strength. Although Malor was slightly weaker, he relied on the attributes of the hunting god to unexpectedly tear apart his scales. But overall, Caesar's nerves were still relatively relaxed. After all, the difference between the two sides was obvious. If the gods had come in their true bodies, the black dragon would have fought with his life, but the opponents were only avatars. These avatars could not even withstand Caesar's bite. If the black dragon bit them with his mouth full of sharp teeth, the gods of wrath would lose a lot of their divine power. They fought from the sea to the island, and then to the land. The battle between the mystic dragon and the gods almost destroyed everything in sight. They set off a super tsunami of nearly 1,000 meters, cracked the island, and sank it. Then they flattened the hills, burned the rainforest, and detonated all the volcanoes from the scorched rock island in the North Sea to the eastern continent. The night turned into day, and after that, there was a super earthquake that could be felt even in the kingdom of Wolfheart. Almost all of the Eladian legends and above sensed this huge disaster. They were also able to determine how terrifying the culprit of this disaster was through the level of the energy that was dissipating. They trembled in fear as if they were chicks that were about to be destroyed. Of course, there were also some who were not afraid of death who chose to go closer to watch the battle, but they were soon overturned by the aftermath of the battle. For an entire day and night, Caesar enjoyed this battle to his heart's content. In the end, the gods of wrath chose to retreat. During this time, Malor's avatar was torn apart countless times. After entering the land, Umberlee no longer had the power to contend with the black dragon. The only one who was more decent, Oler, was also exhausted. They could no longer fight, perhaps because Caesar had been holding back. The Lord of Calamity, Talos, the main god of the gods of wrath, did not appear from the beginning to the end. Chapter 518. When Kaiser returned to his own territory, an uninvited guest suddenly appeared in the courtyard of the Blackwing Empire's imperial court. Talos, the Lord of Storm Calamity, the master god of great divine power, the ruler of the gods of wrath, Talos. He retracted his divine power and appeared silently in front of Caesar, standing lightly. As one of the most powerful gods among the gods, this god's appearance was a combination of many of his divine features. His appearance was based on a human, but not a mortal. There were devil horns on both sides of his head, and his arms were covered with scales and horn-like protrusions that represented the sea. His legs were the sharp feet of birds. He was a one-eyed god, and in his empty eye sockets were lightning sparks. In the original year, the Lord of Calamity was born in the battle between the night god Shar and the moon god Serene. He mastered the power of nature that could destroy everything. Talos. There was no need for self-introduction. Caesar already knew who he was just by smelling the divine power of destruction. You smell like a devil. Really? Thank you for the compliment. Being compared to his mortal enemy, this god did not seem to be angry at all. I know that there's a real devil hiding in your place. Caesar's expression changed slightly. Are you looking for it? That's not it. Talos stared at Black Dragon, and blue lightning burned in his empty eye sockets. Compared to it, I am more interested in you. In the human description of the gods, the Lord of Storm, Talos, was a cruel, impatient, and irritable god. This guy often flew into a rage and was a powerful bully who sought revenge for the smallest grievance. He was extremely addicted to chaos and destruction. But now, his behavior in front of Caesar did not seem to be so. Just now, Black Dragon had a fight with the gods of wrath, and the gods who fought lost at least a few years of divine power to recover. But Talos did not seem to care at all. He spoke calmly and seemed to be in a good mood. But it was also true that these chaotic and evil gods had no friendship with each other. The Lord of Storm also ruled other gods with power and violence. As long as it did not affect his own interests, Talos would not have any emotions because of the setbacks of the gods under his command. Black Dragon raised his eyes and looked at the Lord of Storm, waiting for him to continue. Talos spoke in a seductive tone. Your power is strong, but not enough. It's not even enough for you to leave the prime material plane. Now, a brand new opportunity has appeared in front of you. Embrace storms and natural disasters. That's enough. Caesar curled his lips and waved his claws. You gods are all the same. This is too old. I've seen it countless times. Is that so? Talos looked interested. Tell me, which gods have looked for you? Malat, Tiamat, Bahamut. The black dragon fiddled with his claws. But in the end, everyone's relationship seems to be a little strained, so it's better not to speak, lest we get angry. He, the Lord of Storm, let out a shrill laugh. You've only met low-level gods. They can't give you anything useful. Young dragon, do you know what it means for you to embrace storms and disasters? It's something countless people dream of. I can help you ascend to godhood. Join the heart of fury and become one of us. Talos spoke in a bold tone. From now on, you'll be the dragon god alongside Tiamat and Bahamut, the Lord of Calamity. What do you think? Isn't that a good name? Although it was a little arrogant, Talos was not exaggerating. He was telling the truth. As the ruler of the heart of fury and a greater god, the Lord of Storms had the ability to bestow divinity upon mortals. He had done so many times before. The most recent one was the god of Lich, Visharan. That guy was just an ordinary red-robed mage when he was alive, but because he was favored by Talos, he was promoted to a god. However, that guy defected in the end and was still alive in the pursuit of the Stormlord. He could only live under the protection of the god of mages and the god of magic. Talos was very ambitious. Over the years, he had been looking for dragons with potential and who were willing to serve him. He helped them become gods so that they could compete for the faith of Tiamat and Bahamut. Unfortunately, those dragons failed to ignite their divine fire because of their own problems and became incompetent, evil dragon servants. He had visited this world thousands of years ago. At that time, the Lord of Storms had found an excellent target for himself, the red dragon, Koen-Gudios. Unfortunately, the powerful red dragon rejected him and only maintained a temporary alliance with him. After that, he met the Mad Clamor, but the white dragon was really annoying. Now that Talos had descended again, he thought that the candidate of the dragon god of fury had appeared again. The name is good, but the most important thing is the divine power and divine power, isn't it? The black dragon's voice was like two serrated swords rubbing against each other. The most you can give me is a divine power and a certain divine power. That's not enough to satisfy me. Then what do you want? Talos felt that there was still room for negotiation. Those three guys just now, Hunt, Ocean, and Winter, I want you to find a way to take their divine power and your scourge. Give them all to me. The black dragon's eyes were burning like torches. In fact, when thinking about the future, Caesar did not want to ignite his divine fire and become a god. Instead, he planned to walk the path of hatred and evil to strengthen himself. But he was a very realistic guy. If Talos really agreed to give him these divine powers, then he could change his mind and climb the shortcut to become a dragon god. It was not impossible to work for the Lord of Storms. But Talos hesitated. He could not help but hesitate, not to mention whether it was worth it to take the divine powers from the gods of wrath for the black dragon, and how difficult it was to implement this plan. If he really gave the black dragon the divine powers of Hunt, Ocean, Winter, and Scourge, the monster would become unprecedentedly powerful as soon as he became a god. He might even be able to rival a great god like himself. At that time, who would be the master of the Heart of Wrath? Would he really be able to control this ambitious dragon? Hunt and Scourge, I can only give you these two at most. Talos thought for a while, and sold Marat out in a few words. Why? You can't bear to part with the two goddesses? Caesar smiled mischievously. He felt that talking to this guy was quite easy. So, there's nothing to talk about? The Lord of Storms nodded. Even for me, there's a limit to my ability. This is the best I can give you. Do you need the honor guards of the Blackwing Empire to send you off? Don't worry. Talos was still not angry after being rejected. Based on this conversation alone, he did not feel like the Lord of Destruction and Storms, but like a good old man like Bahamut. Since we can't talk about this, let's change to the next thing. I want to make a deal with you. Not interested. Caesar turned around and wagged his tail, ready to end the conversation. Young dragon, let me finish. Talos smiled. I'm very interested in the magic of destruction and madness, so I've made some preparations. If you help me attract the attention of the goddess of magic to the main material world, I can take this part of the divine powers. The operation is simple and the reward is generous. You have nothing to repay me. Is that so? Is it because it's so convenient that you forgot that it belongs to someone else? Talos' meaningful words startled Caesar. He sensed that the other party was implying something. The black dragon turned his head. What do you mean? Don't you think it's strange? Why hasn't Gawushin come to you to get his eyeball back? You know, it belongs to him in the first place. If he wants to take it, you can't stop him. Talos smiled. Caesar did not speak. He stared at Talos' empty eye sockets that were burning with lightning. An incredible idea appeared in his mind. Chapter 519. Talos and Gawushin were the same person, or rather, the same god. When Talos told Caesar this secret, his first reaction was, of course, doubt. In the records of dragons, humans, and other creatures, there had never been a god who could put on the clothes of another god, have two sides of the same body, and master the priesthoods and divine powers that were completely unrelated to the faction. But after all, that was a god in the eyes of mortals. The boundary of a true god's power, perhaps only they themselves could clearly explain. Shoo! Talos seemed to be very satisfied with the black dragon's hesitant expression at the moment. He narrowed his eyes and said, You are the first creature to know this. Please keep it secret. Talos and Gawushin are the same person. Caesar repeatedly chewed on his words and stared at his empty eye sockets. How did you do it? What do you mean, how did I do it? I know that gods can snatch each other's priesthoods and divine powers, but it is very difficult to kill them, let alone the main gods like Talos and Gawushin. But you actually have all the others' priesthoods and divine powers, which proves that the other god is completely dead. How did you do it? Oh, you think too much, young dragon. The floating god smiled kindly. There is no bloody and dark devouring and snatching. Talos and Gawushin are both me, and it has been so since the beginning of the year. I suddenly feel that it is a bit interesting. Caesar shook his head and slowly turned around. The huge dragon form slowly turned into a small human form. My territory has not entertained guests for a long time. Come in and have a seat. A dark red side door hidden in the wall opened, and the legendary Knoll waited obediently. The incarnation of Talos followed Caesar inside. There was a large table in the elegant black and green hall, and the bookshelves beside it were full of information and documents. There was a wine cabinet in the corner with all kinds of northern brews. It was full of human breath, completely unlike the dragon's residence that was full of gold and treasures. Just by looking at the dense files and reports on the bookshelves, one would think that a diligent king lived here. Caesar sat at the table and motioned Talos to sit anywhere. You told me all this because you were bored and wanted to talk. What's the matter? That's what I said earlier. Talos took out wine glasses and wine from the void and poured a glass for Caesar, as if he was the master of this place. Help me attract the attention of the goddess of magic to the main material world, and I can leave the eyeball to you. It has all my memories as Gawushin and will be of great use to you. It's already mine, Caesar said. Really? Talos smiled. I don't know if it has told you before, but as a part of my body, as long as it appears in the same plane as me, I can retrieve it at any time, even if it's just an incarnation. Do you want to try? A little. Caesar lowered his head and played with the goblet in his hand. Golden ripples reflected in his eyes. But forget it. If this is the condition, I can help you once. Not just once, but an alliance. Talos said, I admire you, young dragon. We can be allies and face a common enemy together. Caesar continued to stare at the wine in the glass with some hesitation in his eyes. He was always wary of Talos, the ruler of the heart of fury, the lord of storms and calamities, the master god of the orc god system. This guy was definitely not easy to deal with. If he wanted to stand with him, he had to be aware that he would be in trouble. But Talos was right about one thing. They did have a common enemy. Talos and Guish's enemy was Pyro, the sun god, and Caesar's enemy was Lamorrihan, Pyro's descendant, which was the empire on which the sun never set. Isn't the alliance of chaos and evil all about backstabbing each other? I've heard that you've backstabbed a lot of people, whether it's Guish or Talos, Caesar said calmly. Is a god who can give up on his own race really trustworthy? Are you talking about the Iradia orcs? Talos drank his wine and said, "There's nothing to be ashamed of. We lost the war, so we have to bear the consequences. The orcs will be cursed by the humans, and the orc gods will never be able to appear in this plane. After that, I could only appear as Talos and order the deep-sea races to continuously invade the land to attract the attention and military strength of the humans. This allowed the orcs to leave behind a seed so that they wouldn't be completely wiped out in this plane. Under Pyro's watch, this was all I could do." Caesar did not ask about the conflict between the Acheloan orc dynasty and the deep-sea countries. It was probably Talos' trick. At that time, the orcs and the sea races ruled the land and sea respectively, and it was difficult to find an equal enemy. A long period of peace would make these fighting races rot. In order to maintain vigorous combat power, Talos let the two races bite and fight each other, just like raising poisonous insects. It was a method that evil gods always liked to use. Black Dragon sneered in his heart and said, "Tell me, I want to know why the deep-sea countries appeared here." The empire of the unsetting sun sent messengers to the deep sea. Not only for peace talks, they also agreed to release the demonic fish chemiger captured hundreds of years ago, just to let the deep-sea countries attack the north. Of course, the sea races had no reason to refuse this condition. As Talos spoke, he pulled out a cigar from the void, cut it open, and lit it. "Want one? It's good stuff produced in the Salaf world. This thing is also available in the north." Caesar glanced at it. The sea races probably don't know that their master god likes this, right? Otherwise, they would have to use it as a sacrifice. I know what you're thinking. Do you think that the gods are old antiques sitting on the throne? Talos pursed his lips, but did not explain. Instead, he brought the topic back to the matter just now. After you caused the Trade Federation to split, the Empire of the Unsetting Sun did not intend to stand by and watch. After they collected all the available information, they decided to let the deep-sea countries attract your attention first, and, at the same time, clean up the Trade Federation's northern forces as quickly as possible, cutting off the tentacles that the North extended to the central region. I guess now, the Great Purge has already begun. It's a pity that they can't get what they want. Caesar smiled lightly. There were many people who helped him. Even if he did not mobilize the power of the Empire itself, the Black Dragon could easily control the situation in the central region. What I didn't expect was that, as the Master God, you would pay attention to these things. These are all trivial things for you. What I pay attention to are the gods who are paying attention to these things, Talos said. It's a bit roundabout, but you should be able to understand. Caesar nodded. Where there is war, there are gods, just like a flock of crows waiting for carrion. Good analogy. Talos clapped his hands and praised. The good gods talk about mercy and justice, but what's the difference between them and the crows when they thirst for faith? Well, about the goddess of magic, I'll call you when the time is right. Talos' figure gradually dissipated. Also, don't retaliate against the deep-sea countries. We're allies now. Keep Hill Canis. She's the blessed of Umberlee and Oler. She'll still be useful when the time comes. Chapter 520. When Ruin Joseph sat up, it was raining outside the house. Through the window, he could see the ferocious raindrops hitting the floral window. The glass let out a whine as if it could not bear the burden, as if it would shatter at any time. Further away, the heavy rain was washing the ground. Along with the hurricane, ripples appeared on the ground. Boundless dark clouds gathered, as if they were about to swallow this small town. This is a good rain, Ruin Joseph thought. It is just nice to wash away the thick smell of blood in Van. This was because 2 days ago, a bloody battle had taken place in this fortress. Van Fort was the bridgehead of the city of Coer. It was an important military town used to defend against invading enemies from the east. Half a month ago, Rune had led his family's army here. From a military point of view, his commander had done a good job. After arriving, he had immediately ordered the army to take action, stockpiling food and building defensive fortifications. Rune Joseph was a careful person. He had repeatedly studied and deduced, carefully instructing his subordinates to do every detail. He had tried his best to do everything well and build an impenetrable defense when the enemy arrived. Unfortunately, no matter how careful he was, he could not guard against spies and moles. Someone in the Vaeger's army had selfish motives and revealed Rune Joseph's military deployment and defensive methods to the enemy. Tashamar's army had been circling around Fort Veer for a week. 3 days ago, in the middle of the night, a powerful figure had attacked the Wizard Tower. More than 20 tower guards, wizard apprentices, and a great wizard had all been killed. Before the garrison commander had arrived, that person had shut down the defense chain and surveillance system of Fort Veer. At the same time, Tashamar's army had begun to take action. They had used strong acid to corrode the dragon-repelling spikes on the city walls. They had used battering rams and heavy hammers to break open the gates of Van Fort. Hissing griffins and hippogriffs had landed on the city walls. Giant wolves and thunder rhinos had roared as they dragged chariots into the square. Dozens of large fires had been set in the city. Fireballs and winds had roared within Van Fort. The hastily organized Vaeger's army had thrown cans of pitch as a counterattack. However, they paled in comparison to the magic cast by the enemy. They were like candles in a burning house. Their bright orange glow seemed so small and powerless in front of the emerald elemental flames. What was even more terrifying was that Tashamu had invited a dragon, the Red Dragon. Although he wasn't old, he was still the real Red Dragon. When Lun rushed to the scene, the giant dragon was angrily roaring on Van Ur's moat. The dragon's aura slapped against its exposed face, and the hot wind lifted its crimson cape. A thick flame suddenly descended from the sky. It was more than 10 meters wide, and the light from the explosion caused people to have no choice but to cover their eyes. The flames tore at the city walls and danced on the surface of the water, crackling and hissing. The sound of the flames drowned out all the screams. Everywhere the flames passed, the earth was scorched, and even the city walls were scorched red. Did you hear their screams? Rune Joseph, do you see them burning? He heard Tashamu's voice echoing around him. I know you're watching. Watch carefully. This is all your idea. This is all because of your stupid mistake. He knew of Tashamu's thirst for victory in battle. At this moment, the Federation head of state might be on horseback, wearing bright armor and a crown on his head. It was a silver crown, simple and unadorned, imitating the shape worn by the ancient kings. Lun listened to his opponent's mockery and witnessed the screams and wails of the soldiers. He didn't say a word. Finally, he turned around and left indifferently. The city gate was destined to fall, but it was still uncertain who would win. At this moment, the city was in chaos. Only thick smoke and fire could be seen, and it was impossible to determine the exact situation. However, before this, Rune Joseph had already practiced this in his mind several times. He whistled softly. Not long after Tashamar's army entered Van, the garrison took back control of the Mage Tower, and the defense system of the fortress was reactivated. After receiving Lun's message, the Black Serpent Army, who had been waiting for a long time, turned the huge winch. Huge chains emerged from the burning water one after another, dripping with water. Some of them were even stained with sticky garbage and mud. Until the entire chain was taut, the city was firmly locked down as if they were catching criminals. At the same time, the Virgil mages sealed off the airspace. Tashamu had allowed his army to charge in, but they could forget about leaving. Everyone, get into formation. After returning, Rune Joseph ordered his bodyguards to get on his horse. In the eyes of outsiders, he was still a brave, noble knight and not a necromancer. He had a war horse with the blood of a subdragon. He wore a neck armor and a helmet, and a fine white silk curtain covered the lower half of his body. Below, he wore heavy chainmail, and the high saddle was plated with mithril. The adjutant handed over a helmet and a battle shield. The shield was forged from elemental black steel. It had a black base and was decorated with a picture of a white bear hugging the world tree. He shouted, "Tashamu claims to be the master of the city, but he broke open our city gate and wants to ransack our city. Follow me and slaughter these bastards." Ruin Joseph pulled out his long sword, turned his horse around, and rushed towards the burning fire. Thus, a bloody battle unfolded in Vanfort. Dong, dong, dong. Lun's memories were interrupted. It was raining heavily outside, but the servant knocked on the door of the study to report that the captain of the garrison had come to see him. "My king." The captain of the garrison wore a steel half-helmet on his curly black hair. He was drenched from head to toe and had a gloomy expression. He said, "We have caught the person who betrayed us, Pinacari. He stole a teleportation scroll with an imprint and was tracked down by the Archmage." "The first traitor since the start of the war," Lund said calmly. He did not even search for this person's name in his mind. "But he is not the last one. You deal with him. Put his head on a spear and hang it outside the barracks as a warning to others." "But," the captain of the garrison hesitated. "Carrie has the title of a knight and a small piece of land. Do you want to do as I say?" Lund's tone was firm. He knew very well that the more lenient he was, the more traitors would appear, especially at such an unstable time. Although he was very sure, Virgil still had not received any support from the north. The captain of the garrison retreated, and Lund continued to stare blankly at the rain outside the window. 2 days ago, even though the Virgil soldiers did not know about this, Lund, as the commander, had made preparations. In fact, the location of every troop was very particular. When these troops were connected from the map of Fort Versailles, it was like a huge net that intersected with each other, waiting for the enemy to fall into it. His plan was very successful. When the time was right, the army of Virgil began to divide the enemy like a pack of bloodthirsty wolves. The allied army of the city-states that was attacked from both sides suffered casualties. They had already realized that they had fallen into a trap and tried to rush out of the city, but they were defeated one after another. At this time, Ruin Joseph only needed to think about one problem, and that was how to deal with the giant dragon. The dragon was squatting on top of the city wall and spitting fire. Even the bravest warrior would panic when he saw thousands of his companions being engulfed in flames. Moreover, it was the breath of the red dragon and not ordinary flames. It burned very hot, and the flesh in front of the dragon's flames would melt like oil. Very soon, he had an idea. It was true that Virgil's army alone would not be able to deal with a terrifying red dragon in its prime. However, he did not actually need to try to kill the dragon. All he needed to do was to lure the low-intelligence monster away. Arrows could be aimed, spears could be moved, and even magic cannons could be adjusted. However, the red dragon had its own will. Tashanmu could invite it to the battlefield, but he could not control it. In the end, Lund Joseph only used a legendary treasure to lure the terrifying dragon away. As one of the greediest true dragons, the red dragon's desire for treasure was far greater than its desire for slaughter and war. The agreement with Tashanmu was even more insignificant in the dragon's heart. However, Lund was sure that the dragon would come back. "We've won." Staring at the rain outside the window, he said softly to himself. After a pause, his tone became firm. "We can win." Chapter 5:21. Nady Andrea had been living a comfortable life recently. As a powerful red dragon in his prime, he owned all the land in the Dragon's Cry mountain range. Some time ago, Tashanmu of the Trade Federation had found him and promised him thousands of treasures and slaves. The red dragon Nady stood on top of the smoking volcano and looked down at his masterpiece with satisfaction. He used the black smoke to warm his stomach. A bunch of insignificant human bugs, fighting for the sake of ridiculous justice and glory. Little do they know that there is something far more important in this world, my treasure, As he spoke, he raised his claws and looked at the thing in his claws with his large dragon eyes. He gently stroked it. Like the other red dragons, Nelly possessed all the characteristics that a Penishade true dragon should possess: greed, arrogance, conceit, and brutality. At this moment, he was deeply pleased with his own wisdom. He did not stay in Fort Versailles for too long and had retreated in time, chasing after more important things. For this, the red dragon obtained a legendary treasure, the painting of Kumas. However, he did not care about the consequences of the departure of the red dragon Nady and the anger and condemnation of the human army's commander to Shamu. Dragons did not care about the life and death of humans, just like how humans did not care about ants. As for the previous agreement, since Lord Nady had appeared on the battlefield, Shamu had to fulfill his promise. Otherwise, these lowly people would have to bear the wrath of the red dragon and all the cities would be destroyed. He was very proud of his intelligence and wealth, just like the other red dragons. I think this place is not bad. It's warmer than the dragon's Crime Mountain Range. All right, I'll announce the ownership of this land. From today onwards, every mountain, every river, every city, every village, every human, every cow, and every beast will belong to Lord Nady Andrea. Anyone who tries to go against him will face the flames of the red dragon. You should feel honored because there is no dragon stronger than me in this world. Nady Amboria's name is destined to spread throughout the multiverse. Just like Kuingu, Dios, Ophelion, Xylan, Mad Clamor, Gattuso, Nady listed a series of names. Every one of them was famous in the Star Realm, but the one at the forefront was still the red dragon, Kuingu Dios. Not only was that guy the most powerful among the mutated dragons, but he was also the role model of all true dragons. Even the most arrogant red dragon would be proud of Kuingu. Under his rambling, the great red dragon, Nady Andrea, had already conquered the entire Trade Federation and was preparing to move on to even greater heights. The red dragon was like that. They were indeed the most powerful true dragons in the material plane, but their arrogance far outweighed their actual combat prowess. Regardless of whether it was in Iradia or other planes, adult red dragons were extremely rare. Most red dragons died prematurely in battle due to their lack of judgment. This also led to another problem. The red dragon that could successfully live to adulthood or even to the prime of their lives would become even more arrogant. When their arrogance reached the pinnacle, it could even evolve into delusions, just like this red dragon in its prime. However, Nady wasn't just delusional. He did have plans to implement his plan, but in order to achieve such a grand goal, he had to constantly sleep. Perhaps after sleeping for another 700 or 800 years, he would have the power to carry out his plan. The red dragon's squinted eyes suddenly widened. A sulfuric smell came out of his nostrils. He looked down at the scorched ground below that had been burned clean. He suddenly opened his wings and said, "Who dares to intrude into the territory of the Burning King?" Not all dragons could unearth spells like early warning and detection from their bloodline, but Nady was an exception. He inherited the detection spell from his mother's inheritance, and he was very talented. This meant that Nady didn't need servants like the guards of the dragon's nest, so he still didn't have any dependents until now. He was a lone dragon. Nady had a premonition that there were living creatures approaching. It wasn't one or two, but a large group. No, it wasn't a large group either, but an army. The dragons were very wary of humans approaching their territory. In this world, there were countless people who dreamed of relying on dragon slaying to get rich overnight and become famous overnight. There were even heroes who made a living by slaying dragons. So no matter whether they were good or evil, the dragons would cast a hostile gaze on humans who approached the dragon's nest without permission. The red dragon Nady opened his huge wings and flew toward the crowd that he had detected. After arriving at the destination, Nady didn't appear like his red dragon relatives. Instead, he hid his presence and watched from above the clouds. This guy boasted that he was smart, and his brain was indeed more clear-headed than the other red dragons. He realized that the humans below didn't seem to be easy to provoke. It was a well-trained army. The army below was like a river of interwoven steel, vast and vast as it surrounded the mountains. Nady roughly looked at it. This army had about 30,000 people. The leader was a noble knight wearing gold and silver, and the sitting spellcasters. Behind them were musketeers, archers, and a large number of warriors and spear-wielding soldiers. In the center of the army, there were many huge things covered in black cloth placed on huge trailers. Each trailer was carried by 5 thick thunderhorn rhinoceroses. Nady roughly probed and found that there were black lumps of iron inside. There seemed to be something similar to a magic core. He didn't know much about it, so he didn't pay much attention to it. The hot wind in the mountains beat on the dozens of flags that were held high above their heads. Nady had some understanding of the central human forces, but he was very unfamiliar with these flags. In addition, the army carried provisions and supplies. The Red Dragon judged that this was not an army from the central region, but from the farther north. It seems that these humans don't know that this is my territory. Should I let them pass? This thought flashed through the Red Dragon's mind, but Nalai immediately shook his head. I am the descendant of the ancestral Red Dragon, Andrea. These puny humans dare to offend me. A nameless fire surged into the Red Dragon's brain. He used his remaining reason to cast 2 camouflage spells on himself, then went around the clouds and quietly approached. To Shanmu, our alliance ends here. The agreement is null and void. 2 days later, the Red Dragon Andrea appeared at the headquarters of the Central Allied Army. He said righteously, I suddenly don't want to play with you humans anymore. I have more important things to do. You better send the things you promised to Dragoncry Mountain as soon as possible. That's it, I'm leaving. Without waiting for Tishamu's reply, Nady, who had turned into a human, strode away. The greedy Red Dragon didn't even try to ask for the reward that Tishamu had promised. Chapter 522. Taking large strides out of the camp of the Tashin Mu army, Nalai's expression suddenly collapsed, and he shivered. What happened here had better have nothing to do with me. No, I didn't even appear here, he said as he transformed into his dragon form, flapped his wings, and flew away. Back to 2 days ago. As night fell, the Red Dragon had shrunk his body and was hovering at a low altitude. Looking to the north, he could see the army's commander-in-chief, and looking to the south, he could see the soldiers' camp. He was hovering in the middle of the army. Nalai opened his nose and breathed in the smell of metal and meat that permeated the mountain range. He felt the fire of greed burning fiercely. In the bard's poems, the Red Dragon was always described as a robber, a bandit, a tyrant, and so on. There were also some poems that shaped the real identity of these characters into the Red Dragon in order to show the imagery. In short, among the thousands of races in Iradia, most of the evaluations of the Red Dragon were negative, and that was indeed the case. When Nalai saw so much potential wealth, he could no longer hold back his desire. Only in the process of enjoying wealth and plundering wealth can I feel alive, the Red Dragon muttered as he began to descend. This army was obviously a well-trained warrior, and there were many of them, jumping up and shouting, "This is my territory, give me all your treasures," was obviously asking for death. Perhaps other Red Dragons would do that, but Nalai didn't think he was that stupid. He chose to use another method, sneaking in quietly to rob. The Red Dragon was a professional when it came to robbing, and robbing. He had been a dragon for hundreds of years, from a young dragon to a young dragon. He was already familiar with the way things were. The seemingly strict patrols and surveillance of humans couldn't stop a dragon with ulterior motives. Nalai easily knocked out a knight who seemed to be the leader, and then kidnapped him. Before he carried out the robbery, he first had to figure out who the victim was. If he was young, Nalai would definitely say, "I don't care who it is, as long as it's in my hands, it's mine." But now that he had grown up, he understood the importance of seeking advantages and avoiding disadvantages. The main reason was that he had robbed a luxurious caravan when he was young. He never thought that the owner of the caravan would be a legendary mage, and that she was actually a descendant of the goddess of magic. As a result, Nalai was chased around the world by that crazy woman. In the end, He had to pay the price and apologize, spitting a lot of blood before she was willing to let him go. Feline Ranft. Nellie would always remember this name. This incident was the greatest humiliation in his life as a great red dragon. Since then, Nellie had learned his lesson and became much more cautious. Before he made a move, he would always inquire about the owner of the item. He became more like a blue dragon instead of a red dragon. One could imagine how much pain those memories brought to him. A warm, salty wind blew in his face. Wayne slowly opened his eyes. It was dark all around. The back of his head was still hurting, and his body was very weak. It seemed that he had been tortured a lot. He struggled hard but could not move. He felt like a cocoon, firmly trapped in the darkness. What is this place? He remembered that he had just left the leader's tent and lost consciousness halfway through. Wayne was one of the few people in Eladia who didn't have any faith. He didn't believe in gods or devils. But in this pitch-black place that was as dark as a well, he couldn't help but wonder if he had already arrived at the divine kingdom or hell. His soul would be pulled to strengthen the borders of hell, which was what they called the wall. Wayne sneered in his heart. He did not expect that he would die so mysteriously. He did not know if the soldiers who were still alive had helped him catch the murderer. Bright flames illuminated his pupils. Two eyes as large as copper furnaces appeared in White's vision, carrying with them a burning flame and a choking smell of sulfur. "Dragon," he said bitterly. The floating flames became bigger and bigger, spreading the light to the surroundings. Wayne found himself in a dry cave, and the thing in front of him was fully revealed. A huge, strong red dragon. "Dragon," Wayne repeated. Nail showed an angry expression. He was very dissatisfied with the human's reaction. Normally, the poor human should have jumped up the moment he saw him, screamed in horror, trembled, and knelt down to beg for mercy. In this way, he would be able to obtain great self-satisfaction. He would be satisfied with his own strength and horror. The red dragon liked to show off their strength and the sense of accomplishment brought by their strength. "Kneel down, reptile," Nail roared. He did not feel satisfied, so he decided to use more cruel means to deal with the human in front of him. "Do you know who you are facing?" "Andrea, the Burning King, sing my name." Without waiting for the human to respond, the red dragon continued. "Tell me, where did you come from? Where did you go? And why did you break into my territory?" The flames came close to Wayne's face, making the hair on his face curl up and hot. He knelt down as the red dragon said, but only on one knee, as if he was performing a knight salute. He said, "I offer you the highest respect, the great Burning King Andrea." If they knew in advance that the army would pass through your territory, the kings of Ersala would have sent you sincere greetings. "This is a misunderstanding. Please forgive me." Why was very calm. He was born in the kingdom of Io in the Ersala region, and he had personally experienced the Battle of Monet's Recovery, which was called the Return of the Nightmare. He had seen bigger battles than this. A red dragon, to be honest, did not make him panic. He could even clearly tell himself that at this moment his thoughts were scattered, his heart was racing, and his limbs were numb. All of these were physical reactions caused by the red dragon's power. "Ersala." The red dragon looked down at him, and two streams of hot steam came out his nostrils. "Human from the north, why did you break into this place?" "I'm sorry, Lord Andrea." Wayne showed an apologetic expression. "Forgive me for not being able to tell you. This is a military secret. Although I don't know why you invited me here, I hope you can let me go back to report first, and then come back to have this friendly talk. The disappearance of a knight commander is not a small matter, and the king will start the search as soon as he gets the news. I don't want to deepen the misunderstanding between us. Are you threatening me?" The dragon's scales glowed red, which was a sign that the red dragon was angry. "Knight commander, didn't your king tell you not to threaten a dragon, let alone a powerful red dragon?" "Lord Andrea, this is not a threat," Wayne said sincerely. "I'm just describing what's going to happen next. Every word is the truth." "Reptile, you've angered me." The crimson dragon stood up with its hind legs, its head almost touching the ceiling of the cave. "Your calm demeanor is really annoying. You puny humans, your lives are in someone else's hands, but you're still mumbling nonsense. You don't know what's going on." As he spoke, the angry red dragon grabbed Wayne with his claws and enjoyed the painful expression on Wayne's face under the great force. "Puny reptile, who do you think you are facing?" "The great red dragon, Nellie Andrea. Do you think I will be afraid of your so-called human kingdom? Do you think I won't dare to step on you like an ant?" Wayne's tears flowed, and his body slowly turned from struggling to twitch. The great force of the red dragon almost broke his bones. He knew very well that evil dragons like Andrea were all murderous, and it was very likely that he would be crushed to death in the next second, especially after being angered and lost his mind. But he still struggled to say, "You don't dare." The great force on his body suddenly relaxed. Nellie threw him to the ground and stared at him with a strange expression. According to the previous performance, the red dragon felt that this human was not an ignorant and stupid egomaniac. He could still say such words at this time. Either he had lost his mind under the power of the dragon, or he was really confident. Nellie wanted to hear it. Wayne on the ground twitched. After a while, he gritted his teeth and squeezed out a name from his mouth. "Tangerine, Tangerine." The red dragon's expression changed from playful to serious. He stared at the human on the ground and said in a hurried and cautious tone, "What did you say? Say it clearly." "Emperor Tangerine." Wayne calmed down for a while and spoke more smoothly. "You should have heard of him. Do you want me to say his real name?" The red dragon's expression changed. After a while, he growled, "Are you trying to scare me with his name? What does he have to do with you?" In silence, Nellie refused Wayne's proposal to say his real name. It was said that Emperor Tangerine was close to God. If he said his real name, he might be able to sense it when they were in the same plane. Wayne said slowly, "Air-Sala is located in the north. He is the king of the north. We came from the north." Seeing that the red dragon did not speak, he added, "Lord Andrea, some things are really military secrets. I have said it clearly enough. Even if this army is really hired by him, do you think he will care about you little people? Little reptile, you think too highly of yourself." Nellie growled, but it could be seen that the dragon was a little weak. Most of his anger was fake. "Indeed, my death is insignificant. Emperor Tangerine will not care about a little person like me." Wayne nodded. "But the king of my king will find you because of the disappearance of the Knight Commander. And once you have a conflict with Ursula's alliance, if the alliance is defeated, the Emperor of the North will turn his attention to this place." "Damn reptile," Nellie growled. He felt that he could not just let it go. This human did not give any evidence that Tangerine was related to this matter. If he backed down like this, and this matter spread out, in the future, anyone could scare him away with just a name, whether it was true or not. But Nellie did not dare to take the risk. The name Tangerine seemed to contain some kind of magic that made people's hearts tremble. The Dragon King, the Black Emperor, the enemy of the gods, a series of titles were attached to this name. It would be a lie to say that he was not afraid. As an evil dragon, Nellie knew more about the deeds of that guy than the human in front of him. He also knew more about the horror involved. Anyone who was an enemy of the Black Emperor would be cruelly punished, and dragons had more terrible things waiting for them. It was said that dragons who were enemies of the Black Emperor would be taken to a place called the Blood Pool and be baptized by some kind of evil magic by the Black Emperor, Caesar Tangerine. After that, they would still remember everything that had happened before, but they would not be like themselves. They would live for the Black Emperor until death. If the other party was only powerful, it would not scare Nellie away, but this kind of brainwashing similar to that of an evil sorcerer was too terrifying. The Northerners said that the transformed monsters were the descendants of the Black Emperor, and Caesar Tangerine himself also called them the blood of my blood. But in Nellie's view, this was no different from the last descendants of the evil dragon, created by the Dragon Queen, Tiamat. It was even more terrifying. No wonder they fought to the death before. Thinking of this, Nellie could not help but shiver. He glanced at the human who was waiting for his response and did not say anything. He snorted heavily, flapped his wings, and flew out of the cave, never looking back. Chapter 5:23. The eye slits of the helmet limited his vision. Lun could only see straight ahead, but when he turned his head, he saw 3 hammer carts leaning against the central square. There was also a catapult that was desperately throwing asphalt stones as cover. Virgil's people filed out of the gap. Wedge formation, he ordered. The cavalry troops intertwined into spears, and he was the tip of the spear. Everyone rode close to each other, their knees colliding with each other as they moved forward against the high wall. The black and white war flag fluttered in the wind, and the white bear and the black eagle danced together. The troops went around the bottom of the castle and gradually accelerated. Arrows shot out from the city wall, and stones spun and flew above their heads, blindly crashing into the buildings on the ground, shattering steel and flesh. The Gate of Triumph was right in front of them, and the enemy swarmed in. They pushed a huge iron oak siege hammer with all their strength and rushed towards the cavalry troops. "Prepare the spears," Lun ordered. Facing the siege hammer, he did not slow down at all and began to sprint. The archers with the magic breaker surrounded them. As long as someone appeared on the gate tower, they would immediately aim and shoot. The ground was wet and sticky, full of filth mixed with mud and blood. His horse tripped over a corpse, and its hooves slipped on the mud. It almost jumped out of the formation directly. Fortunately, Lun used his strength to stabilize the horse and maintain the balance between the man and the horse. The enemy under the gate rushed up, roaring, and met the cavalry's attack with flesh and blood. Lun raised his sword and shouted, "Long live Virgil!" The soldiers responded loudly, and the cavalry flew out, letting out a long screech of steel tearing through silk. The rolling horse hooves and the spears and swords collided into fire. The siege hammer was soon forgotten in the mud, and the people around it either fled or fought to the death. Lun rode his horse and knocked down a soldier who held a shield high. He cut off his arm from the shoulder to the armpit and then cut open his helmet. This sword was a very rare enchanted weapon. Although it was not legendary, it was still very powerful. Lun used it with ease, and wherever the sword went, the shield would shatter, the hand would break, the head would be broken, and the flesh would be separated. Through the padded, heavy helmets, painful wails could be heard. The crackling of the flames, the loud war horns, and the roars of the griffins. Blood and fire were everywhere. In the end, the pike cavalry still managed to get past the battering ram, and the enemy began to flee. Lun looked left and right, but he could not see Tashama's figure. They rode their horses through the scattered corpses, cutting the throats of every enemy lying on the ground. "Well done." The man rode to Lun's side and hit Lun's chest with his right fist, which was covered with a gauntlet. "This city is ours. It's a pity that we didn't find Tashamu." Lun tidied up his helmet and chatted with his companions. They led the team through the flickering flames and smoke, passing through the ruins of the residential area and stepping onto the Long Lord's Bridge. "How could it be so easy?" His companion smiled. He was very young, and his black hair was neatly parted. Even though he had just gone through a bloody battle, it was not much messy. He wore a pitch-black armor, and his helmet was surrounded by a ring of sun-like diamonds. The eagle on top of the helmet had ruby eyes, and a female eagle on his shoulders clasped a long and heavy golden cloak, which hung down to cover the horse's buttocks. The horse armor was also gilded, and it was decorated with the eagle coat of arms of the Charlie family. Charles Charlie, the new king of Io. His father was the famous hero, Nelson Charlie. During the Return of Nightmares campaign, he led 10,000 people to stop the sudden attack of the Viper Dragon Tide at the Broken Mountain Fortress. He fought until the last 214 people died. After that, the Emperor of the Northern Empire ordered people to pay tribute to him and gave him the title of Eagle King. Charles Charlie was also known as the Son of Eagle. This descendant of the hero was not just a name. After Nelson's death, the heavily damaged Io should have been annexed by other countries in the Arizala region. However, after Charles ascended to the throne, he relied on his strong governance and connections, of course. He also had the protection and support of the Blackwing Empire to quickly save the country from the shadow of a great loss. In the next 5 years, the country's strength flourished day by day, and it vaguely seemed to become the leader of the Erzala region. The one in the north did not give up on Virgil in the end, Rune Joseph whispered. The king of Virgil, the hidden necromancer, had a gloomy look in his eyes. No matter who it was, they would be dissatisfied. Rune thought that he had shown enough sincerity. At the beginning of the attack on Coer, Virgil had already cut off their retreat and surrendered to the north. However, the other party had not given a response. It was only when the Virgil people were at the end of their rope and were almost trapped to death by Tashamu that they finally saw the light of hope, the arrival of Ursula's reinforcements. A week ago, Charles led the Erzala army to come under the orders of the Blackwing Empire. Not only did he help Virgil solve the siege of Fort Veer, but he also cleaned up the hostile forces in the city of Coer with Rune Joseph. He also began to launch a counterattack against the Tashamu coalition army. Don't be angry. Charles patted him on the shoulder in a sunny manner. The Black Emperor probably had no intention of going to war with the unfallen empire at the beginning. He should have taken a lot of risks by intervening in the affairs of the central region. Rune Joseph fastened his greatsword and suddenly became silent. After a while, he said, "When can I see him?" "I don't know." Charles smiled. "After all, I've only seen him on the murals. If you must see him, maybe there will be a chance after this war is over." "A war between mortals," Rune said softly with unknown meaning. When the last batch of scouts returned to the castle at dawn, the scholar came to him. "My lord," he said, "we're being defeated." Tashamu stared at the plate of oats, cane sugar, and sausages in front of him in a daze. Another sleepless night had made him sore all over. He was hungry, but when he saw the food, he only felt nauseous. "Enrico hasn't replied yet." "No," the scholar said, "those southerners in Branolin Island haven't done anything either. Send someone to invite him again." He punched the plate. Erzala has already joined the war. The trading city alone can't hold on. Does Enrico want me to surrender? "You're right." The scholar said, "We should take a defensive position now. The opponent's next target is Mernin. As long as Mernin closes the door and defends, Rune Joseph and his allies will be suppressed, and they will be unable to go any further. If necessary, Mernin's food reserves will be enough to support a year of siege." "There won't be a siege." Tashamu shook his head. "In the first 1 or 2 days, they may camp to make ladders and bind claw hooks. But once they find that it's useless, these guys will build a magic circle and force a transmission. Once they succeed, Mernin will be breached in hundreds of places at the same time, just like yesterday." Under the layers of leather, steel, and wool, Tashamu was sweating slightly. "I want wine. Give me a barrel." A fire was lit in the Lord's bedroom. He sat by the fireplace and poured a cup of summer wine from the cellar. This wine was produced in the north, which was hostile to him. It tasted surprisingly good. Tashamu had ordered that no one in the city trade with the north, but he had his own business in secret. A reply from the south soon arrived. "The Empire of the Unfallen has agreed to provide assistance. Mons has led a large group of people up the river and headed north." Chapter 524. Northern Region, Black Rock Mountain. At this moment, in the Hellfire Temple at the bottom of the Black Rock Mountain, Asliers was sitting on the ground carelessly, shouting, "Come, let the flames purify everything." The huge dice bounced up and down, producing a series of metallic clanging sounds. It attacked the opponent directly. The projection of the elegy card danced wildly. "It's over. Die, worm." "Sorry, ice mages will never fall," Caesar said casually. The ice wall spell card on the chessboard activated. When your hero receives fatal damage, prevent the damage and make them immune for the turn. Everything that happened next was logical. 2 fireballs ended the opponent's life, and Asliers lost. "Is it fun to keep using mages? I thought you would play some new tricks." "How boring." Asliers was angry. "Also, there's something wrong with the rules of your game. How can Fireball be effective against the Fire Demon King? It's as ridiculous as petrifying a stone man. I want to be immune to this damage." Caesar ignored him and pulled the molten core into his arms, listening to the crackling sound of the flames. This is just a small game. Of course, the simpler the rules, the better. Thinking too much is limiting. After all, I have to let a guy like you understand how to play. Don't talk nonsense. Let's play another round. Asliers didn't understand the meaning behind Caesar's words. He took out a molten core that had just been nurtured and mixed with liquid and solid from the dimensional space and put it on the ground. Don't count. I'll leave it with you first. If you lose, you'll deduct it from it. Looks like you're ready for a long battle. Caesar said, "You can continue to play, but can you please take back those little guys? I can't stand it if your methods are too clumsy." "Yeah, have I been discovered?" Asliers muttered, not realizing that he had been caught cheating at all. He rubbed his burning bone claws, and a few elemental spirits slowly crawled out of the huge die. In order to prevent magic manipulation, the dice that Caesar and Asliers used to play cards were specially made. They were magic-resistant, but they could not withstand Asliers' brute force. He hid elemental spirits in the dice and used them to control the numbers thrown. These fire elemental spirits were very small, only the size of Caesar's fingernail. Their short limbs made them look like burning fireworks from afar. However, their faces were very prominent, and their eyes were very large. They could make rich expressions. These small fire elementals jumped out one after another at Asliers' call. They made squeaking noises as they hopped into the flames behind Asliers' horn and disappeared. These are the dregs of Inferno, the lowest level little flame demons. They are not warriors. They do not have the great nature of upper realm creatures, and they do not have any combat power. Asliers said, "You seem to be very interested. Do you want me to give you two to play with?" "Forget it." Caesar waved his claws. "But since we're already so familiar with each other, you don't mind providing me with some information, right? Yesterday, I sensed something bad. I knew you didn't come to me just to play cards." Asliers sighed. "Did you sense it? Speaking of which, at your level, it would be strange if you didn't sense it." He elementalized his lower body and sank half of it into the black rock reef ground of the Inferno Temple. Then he solemnly constructed his territory and reinforced it again and again. It's normal to feel the tremor of the boundary wall because the passage is being dug. The kings of the upper realm have already located Iradia. They are opening up the path that they came from. "Tell me more details." Caesar frowned. "It's a long story. Next, let's invite the great scholar Asliers to explain it to you." The Flame Demon King was calm and composed, using flames to outline a pattern out of thin air. We can see the astral world created by Oro as a huge sphere. This huge sphere contains countless small spheres of different shapes. There are bottomless abysses where demons reside, Bator built by devils, divine kingdoms where gods reside, mountain paradise where metal dragons gather, material planes that nurture mortals, fragmented secondary worlds, dangerous and pure elemental worlds. Countless main planes are filled with galaxies. The galaxies aren't pure nothingness. There are also many huge things floating in them, such as huge rocks and islands, volcanoes that spew ice, black holes that can't be escaped from, and some living creatures. Asliers glanced at Caesar. "I know all this." Caesar said, "I'm just helping you review it. These are the basics. If you don't understand it, you won't be able to listen to the great scholar Asliers' lecture." Asliers raised his head with a serious face. This guy's chaotic attribute was acting up, and he was now keen on role-playing. He was now in character. Caesar really couldn't say anything to him. He could only lie flat on the ground and wait for the Flame Demon King to continue his performance. Iradia belongs to the material plane. Material planes are usually stable, the kind of small balls that tightly wrap themselves up. The intersection with the astral plane is almost zero, but this doesn't mean that it doesn't interact with the outside world. For example, where we are now, the Black Rock Mountain. I didn't distort and modify this terrain. The bottom of the desert was originally a bottomless magma river. I just brushed away the sand and dust to make it show its original appearance. Asliers constructed an illusory model of the bottom of the Black Rock Mountain. This river stores trillions of tons of magma. This is common in the elemental plane, but it's rare in the material plane. This kind of special geographical location means that there may be a weak spatial node somewhere. That's indeed the case. The Underdark that we shattered is proof, and I was teleported here from this node with the help of Tiamat's power. Does this have anything to do with the tremors of the world barrier yesterday? Caesar interrupted. It doesn't have much to do with it. If it doesn't, then why did you waste so much of my time? Black Dragon was dumbfounded. The chaotic and evil guys were really weird, and he was actually listening so intently until now. It seemed that staying with Asliers had caused his intelligence to deteriorate. This guy had an intellect-reducing halo. Don't worry, it'll be related in a while. Asliers snorted. If I don't explain clearly, you'll definitely ask me all sorts of questions later. But I didn't ask anything. Even someone as calm as Caesar could not help but want to complain. This guy Asliers probably just wanted to talk. The talkative Balrog King was too lonely in the Black Rock Mountain. It was not easy to meet Black Dragon and Tangerine, who were of similar status and power, who he could communicate with, and who could be considered half a friend. Of course, he would pour out everything he had. All right, let's continue. Asliers obviously knew what Caesar was thinking. The Demon Lord's expression did not change. It's true that I was teleported here, but the bottomless abyss can't possibly allow all the lords of the upper realm to teleport here. Not only Iradia, the nodes in the abyss would not be able to withstand it. If they want to suppress and conquer a world with an army, the lords of the upper realm must build worm-eroded passages. Those things are not easy to get, and the warriors have to dig them one by one with their hands. In the past, those little demons dug the passages aimlessly. If they were lucky, they would be able to dig an exit in 20 or 30 years. If they were unlucky, some demons might not be able to find a plane in their lifetime. Anyway, we'll attack whichever world we dig. There are both successes and failures. So many of you lords of the upper realm will also fail. Caesar made a teasing sound. Most of them succeeded in destroying the world, but there were also cases of failure. There were 2 cases that left a deep impression on me. One time, we dug up the Alliance of Stars. The humans in that place were not strong individually, but they were very rich in weapons. There were lasers, phase disruptors, star destroyers, and other things that I've never heard of before. It was very interesting. Asliers' face showed an expression of reminiscence, and then he shuddered slightly. There was another time we dug into a secondary plane. It was a very inconspicuous place. At first, the upper realm creatures did not pay attention to it, but then we found there Xylan. Demons were not willing to show weakness, but this name seemed to have some kind of magic. It reached out from the shadows and grabbed Asliers' heart. The Lord of the Abyss, the absolute lord of the 601st floor, showed a timid look like a lamb. It was as if the power in his hand had completely lost its effect, and there was no sense of security to speak of. This was a sad past, and Asliers did not want to talk about it anymore. He was not even willing to say the full name of the other party so that Caesar would know. He paused and pulled himself out of the memory. The demons that dig worm-eroded passages are like headless flies, running around without a clue. Moreover, unless the little demons are controlled by magic, it is impossible for them to work together. Even the lords of the upper realm have a hard time ordering them around, so our efficiency in invading other worlds is very low. But this time is different. Asriel's expression turned serious, and he regained the aura of a lord of the abyss. The lords have already located Eladia, and they are currently digging a passage to their destination. As long as this passage is successfully constructed, there will be a blowout, and all the demons will be able to easily reach this material plane through the worm-eroded passage. At this point, Aslier showed Caesar a picture very well. In the picture, a certain material plane was invaded by the demons of the abyss, and all kinds of strange monsters poured out from the black hole in the sky. Although they were suppressed by the rules of the material plane, they still had the ability to tear all material creatures apart. The magnificent cities fell one after another, and turned into burning ruins one after another. In the end, Those gods whose faces couldn't be seen clearly appeared together and barely managed to stop the demons from advancing. However, the flames of war were still everywhere, and the demons were stuck in a stalemate. That material plane was reduced to a battlefield between the gods and demons. No matter what the outcome was, it was already destroyed. If everything goes well, and the other lords do not have different opinions, we will be able to dig Iradia in 100 or 200 years. There was some joy in Aslier's tone, and this made Caesar finally realize that he was facing a demon lord. The vibration of the world wall you felt before was a warning from Iradia's will. I will not let this happen. Caesar's tone was firm. The reason why I went against the wishes of the Lord of the Dark Cloud and told you these things is because I see you as a friend. Since I see you as a friend, I will not let you die. Aslier said, "How are you going to stop it? Not to mention that you are a demigod. Even if you are a real god, it will not help. Do you see those weak gods? If the invasion of the Abyss could be stopped, they would have done it long ago, and you would not have a chance. The worm-eroded passage's environment is the same as the Abyss, and we are the strongest there." "Yes." The black dragon nodded in agreement, and then said, "But maybe 100 years is very short for you, but it is very long for me, too long. It is long enough for me to grow from a baby dragon that has just hatched from an egg to the Lord of the North. After another 100 years, I don't know what Iradia will become and what I will become. If the invasion of the Abyss really appears in Iradia 100 years later, I will stop it and maybe kill some demon lords while I am at it. With your ability, I believe you can kill a few demon lords in the material plane, but you will not be able to stop the creatures from the upper world from coming." Asliers waved his hand. "Well, I did not expect us to end the conversation in such a serious way. Next, I will close the Black Rock Mountain and go into a deep sleep to accumulate power. The next time we meet may be on the battlefield. Anyway, my friend, good luck." Chapter 525. The guys from Elzala are doing a good job. Caesar crushed the communication crystal in his hand and said to the Black Wings higher-ups who followed him, "Virgil has already begun to counterattack. Their commander, Lone Joseph, is a smart guy. He knows very well that the reinforcements are not here to help him defend his position. This lone wolf is tearing Tishanmu apart and setting off a new round of turmoil in the central region. This is very good. Let us have plenty of time to prepare for everything that comes next. Perhaps there are more direct and efficient means." Nero snorted and bared his teeth. "You only need— No, you don't need to do anything. The Imperial Court only needs to send the Black Wings and some of the radiation dragons, and a human city-state that relies on trade for a living will tremble and crawl at the feet of the Empire. With your wisdom, it is not suitable for you to comment. Just listen obediently, Nero." Hog, who was walking beside the demon hound, said, "I believe that you are telling the truth, but tell me, how are you going to deal with the Rising Sun City? Don't forget, they are allies of Tishanmu. The Trade Federation is not worth mentioning. The Rising Sun City is the real trouble. Fight! There's only one way." Nero said in a muffled voice, "Fighting will make our race stronger. We will tear apart all resistance for our king." "That's good. This is what a demon hound should say." "What do you mean? You're just stupid." Hog smiled. He was very familiar with Nero. This kind of teasing was not the first or second time, so he knew that the other party would not be angry. "Okay." Caesar interrupted their conversation and reached out to touch Nero's head. He looked like he was comforting a kitten. "I know you haven't been out for a long time and can't help but grind your teeth. Just wait a little longer." The legendary demon hound with a body size of more than 25 meters was indeed no different from a kitten in front of the black dragon. Caesar led them all the way forward. The surrounding terrain was very high, and the slopes slowly rose. From a distance, it looked like a hill that suddenly rose from the ground. There were few people around, and even beasts and birds could not be seen. At the end, the road ahead was suddenly cut off, and the noise of the waves entered their ears. This was a precipice near the sea. Looking down, it was about a few hundred meters high. "Has the graveyard been completed?" Hog asked. I just found out 2 days ago, so I came over to take a look. As Caesar spoke, he snapped his fingers with his claws. Sparks shot out from his scales, and the clear sound of steel clashing could be heard. This sound seemed to be some kind of signal. The sea breeze became less clear, and it was mixed with another sharp sound. Rip, rip, rip. The sound of the sea breeze gradually faded away, but this sharp sound became more and more obvious, like thousands of pieces of metal scraping against each other underwater. The pitch-black sea suddenly lit up as if it was burning. Gloomy white light seeped out from under the precipice. Then, as if a palace of bones had risen from the sea, the crisscrossing steel and bones weaved into some kind of inexplicable building. It slowly appeared in front of Caesar amidst the rumbling sound. Not all of it, but through the shadows under the sea, at least half of it was still hidden in the deep water. The skeletal dragon Angramo also appeared under the water, bringing with it a strong aura of death. It flapped its skeletal wings and landed beside Caesar. The soul fire in its chest and eye sockets was surging. Father, she was the watcher here. Unbelievable. Hog sighed. I didn't expect it to really be built. Introduce it. Caesar raised his chin. Yes. Angramo nodded. She organized her words and said, the first product of the Empire's Steel Cemetery project, an alchemical creation led by Lich Ryan and completed by the Army of the Dead. This cemetery is 300 meters wide and 135 meters high. It can be used for long-term operations on the sea and help the Empire establish a maritime security network. It has 200 sets of reaction arrays, which can scan and classify targets under various search and tracking modes and automatically correct interference and shielding spells. According to Lord Ryan's tests, it can monitor moving targets in the air and sea within a range of 3,000 square kilometers. It's exactly the same as the goal I proposed. Caesar could not help but praise. What Black Dragon did not know was that in the distant empire, Emperor Enrico had proposed a similar strategic goal. In order to fight against Blackwing's powerful fleet, he ordered the mages to build a maritime surveillance system. Their method was to cast countless sorcerers' eyes in the sea, and the range of each sorcerer's eye overlapped with the other sorcerer's eyes. There was no blind spot. During wartime, a group of mages would control the sorcerer's eyes. Emperor Enrico proudly called this plan the Omniscient Eye. The initial design inspiration of the Blackwing Empire's Steel Cemetery came from a military weapon called radar in Caesar's previous life. Compared to the omniscient eye of the Empire, the biggest bottleneck of the Steel Cemetery was automation. After all, there was still a gap between an alchemical and industrial product and a spellcaster's personal control. To carry the task of monitoring, especially when the range of monitoring was so large, the Steel Cemetery must have a high degree of intelligence. Therefore, the design was very troublesome, and the difficulty was no less than creating a new life. In order to complete the Steel Cemetery plan, Ryan was almost always missing. He ordered the entire undead army to provide him with spiritual power and labor. He also called in the Red Lotus Goblins from the Materials Research Institute, Weapons Laboratory, and other development departments to work through the night. It took him 3 years to finally deliver the finished product to Caesar. Just like what Caesar had said in the beginning, he needed time to prepare for everything that was to come next. The current Blackwing Empire could indeed look down on the Trade Federation. If the Dark Emperor was willing, the Blackwing clan could easily trample all over the Trade Federation. However, Caesar did not view the Trade Federation as his opponent. Instead, he viewed the Empire on the other side of Eladia as his opponent. In order to prepare for the war that would overturn the current situation of Eladia, the Black Dragon needed time to warm up. The chaos in the Central Continent was the best prelude to that. Due to Blackwing's military assistance to Vaegrs in the Central Continent, it would lead to the Empire's assembly line arsenal, the Northern Docks, the Imperial Academy, the Dragon Nest incubation pool, and the clan settlements to enter a state of preparation for war at a leisurely pace. When everything was ready, it would be the time when Blackwing and the unfallen Empire truly went to war. Caesar already knew about the ultimate disaster of Iradia. He estimated that in less than 200 years, the abyssal demons would land on this plain. If he did not have enough power in his hands, he might not even be able to protect his lover and children, let alone Blackwing's territory. Therefore, the Black Dragon had to go all out and start a war. He had to integrate all the power in Iradia as quickly as possible, and at the same time, absorb all the achievements of the Dark Dream that he could. On the other hand, it was unknown if Enriel also knew about the prelude of the abyssal invasion. His actions were exactly the same as Caesar's, interfering with the affairs of the Central Lands to warm up the empire. In the Central Lands of Iradia, Rune Joseph and Tishamu, the two main characters of the war that divided the Trade Federation, were pushed forward by two invisible hands. They had requested for peace on the grounds that their army had suffered heavy losses, but they were strictly rejected. Chapter 5:26. Within a few weeks, the situation in the central region had changed drastically. The Vaegrs had received help from Ilsala and launched a fierce offensive, throwing the allied army into chaos. They lost tens of thousands of people and were forced to withdraw from the Koa region. In order to not lose more territory, Tishamu had no choice but to ask for help from the south. Maine, Monster Fortress. Boom! Scorching shells flew out of the short mortar muzzles. Under the skillful positioning of the dwarven cannoneers, they drew a nearly perfect parabolic trajectory in the air and finally smashed into the Ilsala cavalry charging towards the trenches. The moment the cannonballs hit the ground, the splashing flames and shrapnel that were launched in all directions tore the fragile armor of the cavalry into pieces. After the baptism of artillery fire, the dwarves immediately reloaded their flintlock guns, jumped out of the trench, and poured the bullets onto the battlefield in the crisp sound of gunfire. Although the dwarves had appeared a little late, they were definitely the strength that Tishamu needed the most right now. After many lobbying requests, Prince Maknae was finally willing to lead his Thunderblade clan into battle. At the front of the main monster fortress, Maknae led the Iron Castle warriors to form the most solid line of defense. They were practically facing Ursula's swarming troops head-on. Like a reef in front of the waves, they stood firm. The knights are firmly blocked outside the fortress. They have a lot of numbers, but as long as we guard these few passes, they won't be able to rush up. In addition, the combination of guns and cannons is very suitable for defending the front line. If we have more equipment, that would be even better. Maknae Thunderblade was clad in his own armor and wielding a dark golden warhammer. He led his personal guards through the passageway on the upper level of the fortress. The frontline commander, Yuli Thunderblade, was right behind him, giving him a detailed report on the current situation. There was no joy on the Iron King's face. He stood by the railing with his usual focused and serious posture, looking down at his compatriots who were busy below. The Iron Castle dwarves did not suffer much in the war. After migrating to the Trade Federation, they quickly won the preferential treatment of the city-state. After more than 10 years of rest and development, the Iron Castle's strength was even stronger than before. Although the enemy was numerous, Maknae still had the confidence to face the enemy head-on. He just had to be careful. This is just an appetizer. The people of Aisha, Sala, aren't as weak as they look, or they wouldn't have dared to attack Mernin. Maybe the attack here is just a diversion, and they're planning something else. But as long as we are here, this fortress is impregnable, Wooly said. Really? Maknae declined to comment. The dwarves have been away from the mainland for too long. Many dwarves had not experienced many wars. Their hearts were still stuck in the small land many years ago, competing with the Red Castle's Dark Flame clan and the Grey Castle's Ambitious clan. Yes, the Iron Castle was indeed the strongest of the dwarves in the three castles, but this did not mean anything. After leaving the swamp, they would face challenges from all of Iradia. Almost as soon as the two of them finished speaking, Maknae's warrior's intuition made him raise his head abruptly. His sharp eyes stared at Ursula's army in the valley in the distance. Between the connected mountains and valleys, a faint red light could be seen. This is boom. The scorching halo expanded rapidly in their field of vision, enveloping everyone in a sudden burst of blazing light. Wu Lai howled in pain, as if he was suddenly thrown into lava. His body was like a leaf blown by a gust of wind. If not for McNeil grabbing him at the last moment, he would have been flung off the railing. Boom, 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 boom. At this very moment, in the valley far away from Wester Fortress, 30 steel behemoths were making noises nonstop. Steam rose from their heads, and the black barrels of their cannons spewed out flames one after another. The blazing flames lit up the dimly lit valley. Behind the blazing flames was the ferocious face of the north towards Eladia. The people of Ersala brought the steam tanks of the Blackwing Empire to the central region, but they did not understand the meaning of the word tank. So, in Ersala, these terrible things were translated as tangerine tusks or black tusks. Dressed in heavy black armor, Rune Joseph stood at the front of the formation. He looked at the solid wall of Wester Fortress in the distance that was illuminated by the sunlight. Under the attack of the black tusks, the fortress looked like it was being dismembered. Like a landslide, rocks and broken steel fell from the fortress, mixed with the corpses of creatures that had been set ablaze. This cruel and spectacular scene did not cause any waves in the heart of the necromancer. He was only amazed by the power of these terrible weapons. At first, Rune imagined that they were some kind of weapons similar to magic cannons, but that was not the case. These moving steel fortresses attacked unexpectedly fast, unlike the magic cannons that needed a long time to recharge. Also, when Rune Joseph was not paying attention, he secretly checked them and found that the magic reaction of these weapons was frighteningly low. Relying on such minuscule magic power to create such great power would require an extremely high magic energy conversion rate. This meant that the alchemy technology of these weapons was already very advanced, comparable to or even surpassing the current overlord of Eladia, the Unfallen Empire. This was very inconceivable because alchemy technology was different from wealth and military power. Perhaps a country could quickly amass wealth and recruit an army, but it would never be able to achieve great success in alchemy in a short period of time. This was because alchemy technology was like a staircase. Only after climbing the first step could one see the scenery of the second step, and so on. The development of alchemy level required a country to cultivate for a long and deep time. Some countries might have military power on paper, and their development in all aspects was very good, but they could not even make a magic conversion, such as the current Trade Federation. Looking at the leopard through a tube, one could imagine what the Blackwing Empire was like now. But this country was only founded less than 100 years ago. How to do it? The voice of the Black Tusk commander pulled him back to reality from his thoughts. Stop firing, observe the field of vision, correct the trajectory, move forward, and prepare for the second round of bombardment. How is this unit? Charlie came to his side and asked. Elite. Rune gave a positive evaluation. Of course. Charles nodded with a smug look on his face. It's one of the most important troops in the kingdom. I spent a lot of money to build it. Each of these pilots is a royal knight of noble character who is carefully selected. Pilots, you don't think that these weapons don't need people to operate, right? That's terrible. Charles said, when we bought the Black Tusk from the Empire gave us a 1-year training course. Only students who have obtained the pilot qualification of Blackwing can operate these weapons. Oh, yes, they will also send a maintenance team, saying something like logistical support. Although the food and accommodation of these guys are taken care of by the royal family, I have to say that the Empire has done this very well. You mean? Rune pondered for a moment and asked. These were all bought from the Blackwing Empire? They sold you this kind of thing? At first, Rune took it for granted that this was the Blackwing Empire's army that had sneaked into Ersala. But now, after listening to Charles, it seemed that this was not the case. These weapons came from Blackwing, but now they were owned by Io. With his worldview and knowledge, of course, it was difficult for him to understand the Blackwing Empire's behavior of selling these things as commodities. It should be known that each of these black tusks was a terrible weapon with amazing power. If it were him, he would hide it well as a secret. How could he easily give it to others? Allied channel, 300,000 gold. Charles stretched out 2 fingers. 1. But they don't sell it alone. They say that this thing must be used in an organization, so they sell it in packs of 10 each time. In addition, both parties have to sign an agreement and pay a deposit of the same amount to ensure that these weapons will not be used against themselves. Then how many did you buy? Rune asked. Here, just these. Charles raised his chin and said, We can't not buy them, because everyone is arming themselves with these weapons. Some countries are so militaristic that they can only buy 50 Black Fangs at most. However, the high-ranking lords and I have calculated for a long time. This is already the limit that IO can support at the moment. Chapter 5:27. We must take the initiative to attack. In the fortress, Macnay Thunderblade was riding on a dwarf horse. When he saw the messenger come to him, he frowned and signed his name on the battle report. Inform leader to Shammer that we need his magic assistance. If we don't take the initiative to attack and destroy those iron chariots, they will destroy the fortress directly. Melson, Carrick, Bryn, you are all the best leaders of your clans. You have experienced hundreds of battles and are fearless. The Iron King looked at the mages, warriors, and paladins in front of him. He stroked his beard and said in a deep voice, Now you know the mission of the dwarves. I want you to stay and lead the reinforcements to Norland's Trail. Go around and cut off the enemy's supplies. I will defeat the enemy and set up a new defense line in the destroyed Creek Valley town. Do not disappoint me. Understood. The 3 dwarven commanders looked at each other. Not long after the Iron King and the Thunderblade clan left the fortress, they waited for Deshammer's reinforcements, 30 enchanted puppets. Enchanted puppets appeared on the stage of Eladia at the beginning of the Third Era. At the beginning of the design, these golems were only 2 to 3 meters tall. Their combat ability was not outstanding. At that time, they could only carry out some simple orders and perform tasks like guarding and patrolling. However, at that time, these puppets had already shown their great potential in a certain aspect. They were created through the basic principle of changing reality through a wish spell. They could not be regarded as a magical creation, but as an independent item. Because these puppets did not have real life and did not have the physiological characteristics of living creatures, they were naturally immune to many magical effects. The pioneers of the Third Era saw the potential of these puppets and decided to invest in their research. With the development of human civilization and the advancement of alchemy and rune technology, the enchanted puppets were constantly updated and gradually became Iradia's main weapon on the battlefield. Currently, the mainstream magic puppets were already 10 meters in size, and the largest could even be 20 meters in size. They were stable and immune to most spells. Moreover, the creator could insert up to 3 types of spell models to strengthen them to meet the needs of war, such as swift, ferocious, tenacious, and indestructible. By the time the dwarven commanders arrived at the Norland Trail between the Grey Mountain Ridge and the valley, the battle on the other side had already begun. Under the command of Son of Eagle Charles and Marquis Poisonheart, Lone Joseph, Ursula's army was gathering at the border of once fortress like a dark cloud. They were planning the second round of attack on the fortress. This army was huge, and there were still legions coming from the rear. On the other side, the king of the Iron Fortress, Macnay, had already led his army out of the fortress. He commanded the dwarven soldiers to charge left and right, while he himself held a short axe in one hand and a heavy hammer in the other. He leaped off his pony and charged forward on foot, like a cold-blooded and precise weapon of war. Every time he attacked, he would completely cut down the enemy in front of him. Macnay's attacks were extremely lethal. He held a holy weapon blessed by the gods, and he himself was the god of dwarves, Moradin. Every time he swung his short axe and heavy hammer, Electric arcs would spurt out, causing area damage to the enemy, paralyzing and even killing a large number of Ursula's soldiers. In the bloody battle between the dwarves and the humans, the warriors in the front row did not attack, according to Macne's request. Instead, they held large enchanted shields and formed a shield formation at the front of the battle line to block the rain of arrows from the enemy. In the rear, the musketeers were wildly firing. These dwarves were very proficient in shooting, and every one of them was a superb sniper. The flintlock muskets, coupled with the barrels of gunpowder that were thrown from time to time, posed a huge problem for Ursula's troops in a short period of time. The turning point appeared 10 minutes later. Charles sensed the dwarves' strategic intentions and decided to stop them. So he activated Tusk again. Rumble. The unique roar of those black steel monsters resounded throughout the battlefield. In the roar of the super-powerful engine and the low roar of the auxiliary magic energy core, the steam tanks quickly rushed to the front line. They did not only have a main cannon as a weapon, but also several continuous fire muskets on both sides of the muzzle. The diverse weapon system made them not only the overlords of mid-range artillery, but also able to explode with great power at close range. The dwarves were still pushing forward with their shields, but even the big shields that were enchanted with magic could not withstand such high-frequency single-point attacks. Cracks soon appeared on the shields covered with magic patterns, and then the whole shield shattered into pieces. The crazily tilted gunpowder bullets formed a shining belt in front of the muzzle, like the sharpest scythe, smashing the giant steel shields and the dwarves' flesh and blood behind the giant shields into pieces. When they reached a designated position, the steam tanks suddenly all stopped, then adjusted their muzzles and pointed at Macne Thunderblade, the king of the Iron Fortress, who was bathed in blood. From the beginning, Macne had been the focus of this war. This guy was too eye-catching and too lethal, so Charles and Lund had to make him the first target. Macne, who was in the middle of a fierce battle, suddenly felt a great sense of danger. He looked up and saw the black muzzle spewing out flames. These bastards of Ursula actually did not care about the lives of their own people and fired at this chaotic area. "It has to be like this," Lund said in the distance. "If we don't kill him, he'll kill more people. The warriors of Ursula are immortal." Charles looked at the area where the black tusks were aiming at and closed his eyes. This order was given by Lund, but it was acquiesced by him, which made him feel a lot of guilt. The tanks roared, and the loaded bullets left the muzzle at a speed that was difficult to be seen by the naked eye. The bullets were ejected from the large caliber muzzle, and the super long muzzle gave the steam tanks unparalleled precision. The first and second shells exploded at the predetermined positions, hitting within 1 meter of Macne, and the third shell accurately hit the dwarf's body. A cloud of smoke formed in an instant, and a huge impact threw all the sand and dust into the air, including broken armor and weapons. But the fourth shell was bounced off, as if it had hit a hard mirror and caused a refraction reaction. The fourth shell changed its angle after hitting the target and exploded in midair. Charles's eyes widened. The first to leave the smoke with a war hammer and the hand axe, their surface floating with a brilliant silver glow, followed by the body emitting the same silver glow. Iron King Macne reappeared, his body showing a metallic luster. His eyes were filled with rich energy, and his pupils could not be seen. It must be known that in the previous test of the Blackwing Empire, even a strong and healthy adult demon dog would lose all its combat power in an instant if it was hit within the effective range of the steam tanks. But Macne took 4 shells head-on and was unscathed. Holy Spirit State. Lund's pupils widened a little. This guy is a god's chosen. Macne, who was out of the gunfire, seemed to be very angry. His body was more than one size bigger than before. He raised the war hammer surrounded by electric arcs and shouted, "This is a dwarf. Throw!" Boom! The magic-resistant reactive armor on the surface of a steam tank was directly smashed by the small war hammer, and the whole tank was completely deformed. Although it could dissipate the electric arcs and magic effects on the war hammer, it could not resist the power attached to it. This was definitely an attack above the legendary level. Chapter 528. At this time, Maknae seemed to have changed into a different person. He was as majestic as a god, and there seemed to be infinite power radiating from his body in all directions. He stretched out his arms, and a war hammer surrounded by electric arcs automatically returned to his hand. The King of Thunderblades stepped forward and looked up at Ursula's infantry. His breathing was deep and long, and his grayish-brown curly hair was blown back by the wind. Maknae strode forward, exposed to the attack range of the steam tanks. His mithril armor was shining, and the sky was still cloudy. Originally, Ursula had chosen to attack at noon, and even if it was a cloudy day, there should be enough light. But at this time, the valley was as gloomy as before dawn, and the wind seemed to carry the low roar of the spirits. Charlie held his long sword uneasily and stared at the dwarf king standing alone in the middle of Ursula's army. Faith and glory. Maknae's voice came from all directions, rumbling with echoes. He raised his war hammer and roared at Ursula's army. Face the rolling thunder. Feel the anger of the god of Moradin. The lightning split the cloudy sky, and the thunder was like a heavy hammer on a huge iron felt, and this iron felt was buckled above the world. The dwarf gods waved their forging hammers and slammed on the dome. The sky was torn apart by the lightning, and a hole appeared in the middle, briefly revealing a brilliance 100 times stronger than the sun. Peepa! A thick lightning bolt fell from the sky and accurately hit a steam tank that was adjusting its shooting angle. Electric arcs flowed on the magic reactive armor, making the surface of the steel-black iron beast flash with mottled brilliance. The tank made a sound of gears churning, and then it became still. It was not completely damaged. When the steam tank plan was proposed, the design of the defense system was the most important, but the developers, the Red Lotus Goblins, neglected one point, which was the protection of the mortal drivers in the design of the steam tank. The drivers were orcs and goblins. After being hit by the thunder, the main parts of the tank were well protected, but the electric arcs penetrated the insulation layer and penetrated into the cockpit. Even if it was only a little, it was enough to mince the lives of these ordinary people. Without a controller, no matter how powerful a weapon was, it was just an inanimate object. Maknae knew this very well. As a warrior, the Dwarf King cast a forbidden spell. Lightning bolts fell from the cloudy sky one after another, hitting the strategic weapon steam tanks of Ursula's army one after another, killing the drivers one after another, causing the Black Tusk army to lose their ability to move and stop firing. At the same time, another dwarven unit that had circled to the flank rushed into the battlefield with the golems. For the Thunderblade clan. For the Trade Federation. This is our territory. Get out. The Dwarf King's miraculous performance had completely turned the tide of the battle, raising the morale of his own side to the highest point. The dwarves blew the horn for a counterattack, and the garrison of Wester Fortress poured out in full force. Griffins and hippogriffons descended from the sky, and crossbows and lances were shot out. The golems and puppets took large strides to open up a path. The enemy was retreating. Ursula's battle line was constantly moving back. Maknae realized that the enemy was retreating. They had won this battle. What's the point? Whispers rang out on the battlefield. I heard you. Come out. Maknae shouted. Rune Joseph, your cheap spells can't disturb a dwarf. If you still have the courage, come out and face me. You won. So what? Rune Joseph's voice echoed on the battlefield. The outcome of a local battle can't decide anything. If you're determined to resist to the end, all of you will die in the end. You're just stalling for time so that your soldiers can retreat. Maknae cut down an air selenite. We won, and we will continue to win. Tell the northerners behind you that if they still want to set foot in the central region, the dwarves will let them taste the taste of a hammer. The army was gradually retreating, but Rune's voice still rang out. He was not stalling for time. He really wanted to communicate with the Dwarf King. Thunderlord Maknae, I admit that you are the strongest in the central region. You have the power to turn the tide of the battle. Maknae said, but so what? Compared to the Black Emperor, You are just an ordinary person. His power compared to yours is like a drop of water compared to the sea. Your meaningless struggle now is futile. When the tide of black wings in the distance surges to the other side, your clan, your allies, and even the gods behind you will be powerless. Macne seemed to be a little tired from the previous battle. He randomly found an enemy's corpse and sat on the knight's armor, panting slightly. After hearing Rune's words, he sneered. Is that so? Then according to what you said, Iradia won't have any more battles in the future. Everyone will sit down and arm wrestle to compare strength, and then the weaker side will surrender directly. Is that what you mean? Rune was silent. He did not know what the dwarf wanted to say. Idiot! Macne suddenly scolded in the dwarf's language. Then his tone changed. Listen, human, it's not like that. All the stories in this world are about the weak fighting the strong, not the strong bullying the weak. That's why heroes appear and epics are born. Maybe you will bend your knees in front of a dragon, but dwarves won't. Dwarves only have battle axes and hammers. When the Swamp Alliance fell apart, the kings of the 3 castles went to different places. Prince Marin of the Red Castle led the Storm clan to the Unfalling Empire, while Prince Adas and the ambitious clan of the Grey Castle went to the north. They received preferential treatment. Rune tried to persuade the gods chosen. Your compatriots are there. Black Wings is not a tyrannical dragon territory, but a kingdom with many followers. Macne, join us. Just like Prince Adas, you can also feel the goodwill of the Black Emperor. You came with war, spread the plague to every race, and let the flames of war burn every corner. If this is the goodwill you speak of, I think I do feel it. Macne sneered. His breath became even, and he gradually recovered from the previous consumption. You don't understand at all why Emperor Caesar did all this. Before Rune spoke, Charles couldn't help but interrupt with a slightly agitated tone. You don't know what this world will face hundreds of years later. The war of unification is imperative. You don't understand. Macne interrupted him with a louder voice and an angrier posture. This is our home, our wives, our children, and everything we cherish is behind us. No matter what reason you have, as long as you enter this land, the Thunderblade dwarves will stand here with weapons in hand, because we are protecting everything we have. Let the king of the Black Wings come. We will build the high walls of the fortress with our own bodies. We will never retreat until death. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.